Բանավեճի են հրավիրված արտահերթ խորհրդարանական ընտրություններին մասնակցող բոլոր քաղաքական ուժերի նախընտրական ցուցակները գլխավորող գործիչները։
Այս հարթակը բացառիկ հնարավորություն է 11 քաղաքական ուժերի ցուցակները գլխավորող գործիչներին մեկ վայրում ներկայանալու եւ քննարկելու մեր հասարակությանը հուզող հարցերը։
Բայց մինչև քննարկմանը անցնելը պարոնայք բանավեճի կանոնների մասին, առաջին փուլում բոլոր մասնակիցները կունենան 2 րոպե ներկայացնելու իրենց ծրագիրը, հղելու իրենց խոսքը։
To the viewers, this is an opportunity for the candidates to address their speech directly to their
Պատասխանող թեկնածուն կունենա 2 րոպե պատասխանի համար եւ արձագանքելու համար հարց տվողը կունենա եւս 1 րոպե։
Եվ պատասխանից եւ հարց տվողի արձագանքից հետո կտրվի 5 րոպե բանավիճելու համար, բանավեճին կարող են մասնակցել բոլոր մասնակիցները, թեկնածուները արձագանքելով թե հարցին, թե արձագանքին։
Եվ վերջում ավարտին յուրաքանչյուր մասնակից դարձյալ կունենա 1 րոպե իր խոսքը հղելու կամ իրար կամ ընտրողին։
Եվ հեռուստադիտողին հիշեցնենք, որ մեր հյուրերը տաղավարում կանգնած են ըստ քվեաթերթիկում ներկայացված համարների։
Եվ այսպես սկսում ենք ժամացույցի սլաքի ուղղությամբ Հայաստանի Հանրապետական Կուսակցություն, Վիգեն Սարգսյան, 2 րոպե ունեք, խնդրեմ։
Շնորհակալություն։ Սիրելի հայրենակիցներ, այս կիրակի մենք կատարելու ենք ընտրություն, որից կախված է լինելու մեր երկրի ապագան առաջիկա 5 տարիներին եւ անդին։ Հասարակությունը սևերի եւ սպիտակների բաժանելու իշխանությունների քաղաքականությունը ոչ այլ ինչ է, քան ներքին թշնամիներ որոնելու եւ ստեղծելու եւ այլակարծությունը խեղդելու միջոց։ Ով իմ դեմ է, ժողովրդի դեմ է, ով իմ դեմ է, պետության դեմ է, ով իմ դեմ է, հանցագործ է մոտեցումները բնորոշ են բոլոր բռնապետերին։ Պոպուլիզմը դա գաղափարազուրկ կառավարման միջոց է, որը բռնապետություն հաստատելու ամենակարճ
Populism is a means of governing without any ideology, the shortcut to tyranny.
Նիկոլ Փաշինյանն արդեն որոնց մասին խոսենք բանավեճի որոնք խարխլում են պետության հիմքերը, վանում են մեր դաշնակիցներին, ուժեղացնում հակառակորդներին
erode the foundations of the state, push away our allies, strengthen our foes. Pashinyan submits to the choice of the people, not with a political team, but with a list based on personal devotion, the representatives of which are not only incapable, but do not even intend to strengthen the state. The atmosphere of pluralism and the freedom of speech has been poisoned in this country. It will shrink further if it's not prevented on December 9. Xenophobia and street argot has already entered the public lexicon and will become domineering if we do not prevent it on December 9. The independence of the courts and the judicial system is jeopardized and will be eradicated altogether. If we prevent that on December 9, the economy is plummeting and we will end up in a crisis if we don't prevent that on December 9. December 9 will be a choice between, is not a day of choice between the old and new authorities, it's the decisive day of casting of our ballot. Will Armenia become a single-handed tyranny or will it move on to a system of checks and balances, an open and equilibrium? Thank you. Social Democratic Citizens Decision Party, Suran Sargsyan, 2 minutes, please. Dear citizens, I would like to inform you up front that the coalition and semi-coalition old powers are those with whom I have nothing to talk about, for a simple reason, because they have contaminated this country, they have eliminated justice, they have erased the border between good and evil, hundreds of thousands of citizens have been deprived of their right to live in their own country and to dispose of their own destinies. During the years of their governance, I personally, in order to exercise my rights, for exercising my rights, have ended up in police precincts and courtrooms many times. There are many more who have been silenced, beaten up, and ended up behind bars. They have distorted our public relations, made the citizen an object of charity, vote buying low, rights-deprived subject. In the parliament of this country, I do not see these people. They don't belong there. Mr. Pashinyan, when myself, you, and other friends talk about the revolution, is it the kind of Armenia we had in mind? We imagined where people's vote rigor is aspiring to a mandate of the parliament, a person catering to his, a group of persons, criminals catering to their own rights. You yourself commenced to resuscitate political corpses. What does it lead us to? It led us to the tactics of black and white that has led to a situation whereupon if you're against the goal, you have to vote for Republican. And if this criminal clique ends up in the parliament, you will bear the political responsibility for that. Thank you, Mr. Saakyan. Armenian Revolutionary Federation, Armen Rustamian, please, 2 minutes.
Distinguished compatriots, everything that happened in Armenia this year was indeed unprecedented. All people's movements took place and played a significant role and opened a new door for change for Armenia. And the result of that movement, unfortunately today, has resulted in a situation that at large change has taken place, and Nikol Pashinyan has replaced Serge Sarkisyan, essentially a change of people. So if it stays on this level, with what we've started, stays on this level, then frustration may quickly disperse among people very quickly. So the main task for us is to continue the real revolution, to complete the revolution, and it may become complete and do not contribute to frustration among people if it becomes visible for everyone and enters everybody's house, knocks at everybody's door. And for that, it needs to have the substance, very clear substance. It is that substance with which we come before our electorates. The constituency emanating from our socialistic ideas, approaches, patriotic approaches. We have to do everything in order to solve the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh, and the issue of relations with Turkey. So we do not anyhow undermine the achievements that the generations have made through time. Our social problems have to be solved in a way so that no Armenian is poor, and we have to also assess poverty in the right way. A minimum basket that provides not only for the minimum food, but also provides for existence of dignity. Social issues are so important for us, and the solution to these issues will turn revolution into something real, so we would not experience frustration or disappointment again. Thanks a lot, Mr. Rustamian. My Step Alliance, Nikol Pashinyan, please, your 2 minutes. Thanks a lot, distinguished compatriots, proud citizens of the Republic of Armenia. Let me now make an attempt to present those changes and important decisions that have been made for the last 7 months in Armenia. First of all, by 20 and 10 drams respectively, the power and the gas have become cheaper, in contrast to the agreements signed by the former government. The drinking water has not become more expensive, and it will not till 2024. 2,000 people have increased salaries from the 1st of July, and another 2,000 people will get higher salaries during 2019. Pensions and benefits will increase from the 1st of January of 2019. 1,000 dram fund, well known for the protection of the financial interests of our soldiers. will essentially be considering cases before 2016. Family apartments, budget apartments, the interest rates have been reduced to unprecedented low levels, up to 5% for mortgage, and newly built apartments, essentially zero interest rates are issued. The prices for real estate have increased, as well as the number of transactions in real estate. 125,000 people have now clean credit history. There are guarantees, and they can take new credits. The benefits for families with 3 children have been doubled by 38%. We have increased the registered employees. Economic monopolies have been eliminated. The overloadedness of penitentiaries has been solved. Overcrowdedness on amnesty of the traffic violation payments, duties in total of 135 billion Armenian drams has been performed. I feel pity that I don't have the time. Ultimately, this debate is taking place, which is unprecedented. Thank you, Mr. Pashinyan.
Mr. Marokyan, Bright Armenia, 2 minutes. Thank you. Dear compatriots, I have the honor to represent the party Bright Armenia. The Bright Armenia is a liberal union, political, founded 3 years ago. Over these 3 years, it has demonstrated that it is it's a team of principled, ideological persons, always fighting for people's rights. It voted against their Sargsyan's third term on April 22. It always fought against injustice. In October 2, it identified the sabotage in the parliament against the Republic of Armenia. The Bright Armenia has a platform, a program. It pertains to the even territorial development. We, for a long time in Armenia, have been talking about the ineffectiveness of the system, where just one city developed and the remaining communities were unfairly underdeveloped. There is a big package of legislative amendments where SMEs will be protected, the tax burden will be light, administrative burden will be light, and the right of citizens shall be protected. The workers in Armenia are in very dire straits. They do not conclude employment contracts with them. Their rights are trampled upon. We come to protect them. The Bright Armenia has a serious foreign policy program which assumes strategic developments with the EU, assumes relations with the Russian Federation, whereupon Russia will refuse to sell arms to Azerbaijan. As a new political unit, the Bright Armenia comes with the aspiration to become the second political association in the parliament. Our meetings and our contacts have demonstrated that the citizens of the Republic of Armenia, our nation, see us as the second political power in the future parliament. We shall be the balancing presence, upon the presence of which there will no longer a need in our Republic of Armenia to dissolve the parliament or do a revolution. Bright Armenia also has a program about other sectors. Quite naturally, the time didn't allow for that, but we've been seeing you, dear compatriots, and we shall see you hereafter. Thank you very much, Mr. Marokyan. Now, Levon Shirinyan from the Christian Democratic Rebirth Party. Together with we joined the revolution on April 2, and we are the radical supporters and remain radical supporters of the revolution to this day. For this purpose, we attempted to and succeeded to a certain extent to disseminate the reevaluation of the Christian democratic values of our national tradition, based on our national traditional values. We developed a conceptual framework for it. Today, we clearly state if the Republic of Armenia is not going to change its strategic development path, is going to remain under the influence of the usury and financial capital, the mineral resources, the wealth, the assets of the country shall remain under the exploitation of certain companies or as their assets, we believe the revolution shall not be deemed a success. For this, we have developed a clearly well-organized, evidence and science-based conceptual framework. Let me tell you the following. We not only are against the market, not exactly the market, we propose the conceptual framework of social market economy, where the market economy caters to the social issues. This is a paradigmatic, philosophical, political concept that has been adopted in the best countries of the world, let's say South Korea. It's been applied in Germany and elsewhere, and it has yielded the best, the utmost results. We think that parliamentarism should develop because it's a well-balanced parliament that can ensure the progress of the country, for which purpose we assume that about 60% of the 60% of the governing party in the parliament should be sufficient for a stable policy of the prime minister, and the remaining party should also be present. Thank you, Mr. Shirinyan. National Progress Party, the only woman Democrat, Lucine Harayan, you have 2 minutes, please.
Dear folks, unfortunately, this electoral campaign turned into a way of criticizing one another, but we all together did the revolution in April and May, blocking the streets. We were hoping truly that ultimately we will have a good political framework that harbors healthy political powers, new powers, so that our political framework turns not into a way of protecting somebody's interests, some clans, some families, but really a place where healthy political struggle takes place. And our political party, the National Progress, is the one that wants to bring that new culture. We are the owners of our country movement. Has also been led by us in certain periods of time, again, the criminal oligarchic regimes, and based on that movement, the National Progress Party was established. We love our country, we want and we are ready to sacrifice the professional preferences for the benefit of New Armenia, benefit of Armenian people. The National Progress Party is a power of human-centric. We think that the government has to take care of the citizens in order to create a socially healthy environment. We are going to eliminate the prevalence of capital. We are going to free our nation from the hands of usury and abuse. We are going to establish economy as the priority sector while taking your mandate. At the same time, we will eliminate the impunity by eliminating the immunity of the members of the parliament. And the National Progress Party is it represents your choice. Thank you. We Alliance, Aram Sargsyan, 2 minutes, Aram Sargsyan, thank you. Good evening, dear friends. Good evening, everyone. We Alliance is the second during these elections, and we're the second to participate as an alliance. We need to get 7%, respectively, your votes, after my step currently would come to us. Hopefully. We're here and we're asking for your vote. We have not been following one another a lot, and we have apparently missed the foreign policy issues. Dear friends, we are in a situation that is neither war nor peace, and in wars, not armies, but countries win. And for Armenia as a country to win in this war, we have to come together. And that's the main symbolism in the name of the political party of ours, being we, as an alliance. The war in April came to prove that in certain situations we are able to unite, come together and solve problems. My dear friends, after the Second World War, once again, the world is being reshaped, and it is not possible to not notice that. We have to diversify the foreign policy of ours. We have to create a parliament that represents as many political powers as possible. Preferably, all of you are represented there. We have to have a parliament that is beyond any foreign influence, especially Russian.
Mr. Sargsyan, you have another 10-12 seconds. I always save 10-12 seconds. Thank you for saving those precious seconds. Thank you. Rule of Law Party, Artur Baghdasaryan, you have 2 minutes, please. Thank you. I would like to warmly, cordially welcome all of our compatriots and the participants of this debate in the studio. Wish them fair competition in winning the confidence of the people. I would like to welcome this fact. This is the first ever in 30 years in Armenia when public TV organizes a debate between the leaders of the campaign. This is a small but important accomplishment of New Armenia and the new reality. Secondly, I would like to refute a certain value that's been put in circulation of late, this wiretapping issue. On the one hand, wiretapping the head of the state, on the other hand, wiretapping leaders. I've been myself a victim of such wiretapping in the past, so I resolutely reject such a work style for political ends, because this is not honorable for this country, for our motherland. We have always been for political tranquility rather than political war, political competition and not political hatred. That which is happening in Armenia, and this is already the second such occasion, I would like to unambiguously reject that. As for our programmatic approaches, the rule of law party has drafted 250 laws in Armenia along many sectors. We have put in place lots of reforms, and even now we present our vision of the development of this country. Supporting the revolution, we still believe that the revolution has yielded a perfect opportunity for Armenia to progressively develop. We need for that competitive ideas, experienced political structures and politicians who are capable of taking this country towards progressive development. After all, today there are serious issues, socioeconomic development, we have challenges in foreign policy, we have challenges, so we need to work together to address these issues. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Baldasaryan, for appreciating this initiative by the public TV. Sasna Tsarrer, Pan-Armenian Party, Varujan Avetisyan, please, your 2 minutes. Thank you. Sasna Tsarrer, Pan-Armenian political party is a newly established presence, but as a political presence, it's been on the scene for many years. Over these years, we have developed a comprehensive holistic program about the future of the state for the development of this country along every dimension. I have, without redundant modesty, to acknowledge that all of the viewpoints about radical change that have been voiced here are included in our program. We have a comprehensive program which also doesn't have some of the views expressed here. This is about the program we have. As for how do we intend to resolve all this, I believe today we should keep this in our focus, our priority attention. Everyone claims this and that has to be done, but in order to get things going, we need certain opportunities. This opportunity we may enjoy only if the tremendous wealth that has been pilfered from this country, at least on the initial stage, if it's partially returned. We see no other way to get there rather than transitional justice. Not the transitional justice that to this day has been around and discussed. We need a more comprehensive type of justice on the bench of which the entire criminal collusion will be faced with the powers that led the March 1 coalition and the Republican Party, with all due respect to everyone present here and other organizations, because the liability of individuals shall be resolved by the court. Only after we return those assets we could resolve the issues of the people with disability and the entire range of social issues and in general security and other issues of this country. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Avetisyan. Prosperous Armenia Party, Gagik Tsarukyan. You have 2 minutes, Mr. Tsarukyan. Thank you. Dear beloved compatriots, first and foremost, I would like to cordially welcome all of you. The campaign has begun. We all know that. We held meetings in all provinces, marzes. We meet them in the provincial capitals, present our program. We know the issues, the problems that exist. Today there was a revolution which was necessary to our nation, an economic revolution. Today the people impatiently sitting out there throughout the world are awaiting to see what is it that we're going to debate about or discuss. Today we need, let's say, an economic revolution, which I already have presented, and I can reaffirm it now. We need to have tax reforms, banking, economic reforms, student, educational, military, industrial reforms. The state of the nation today, which everyone is aware of, the people are awaiting from us that which they have been awaiting, for something real to change in their lives, not in words but in practice. That which I have presented our programs, of course, time sufficing, item by item, what I've been saying so far, I am owning up to those words, and I would like to reiterate once again, without those bullet points, nothing ever will change. We should be able, item by item, go through this list. The laws that have been enacted under the previous authorities, they have not justified themselves. Whichever didn't prove itself and the funding has been released, we have to be persistent, not to have it pulverized, for these funds to serve a purpose. People are awaiting from us in their real lives, in the wake of this revolution, tomorrow in the wake of the elections, in their daily lives, things should change. For example, they are vulnerable households, they are students. We always claim the students are our future, they come to replace us, but we have globally failed to resolve anything. We've just tangentially, in passing, addressed some issues. We have to make our words into deeds. Everything I say, after proven by deeds, is what we present to everyone. If anyone would like to say something, I'm ready and willing to expose everyone. Thank you, Mr. Tsarukyan, and I would like to thank all participants for sticking to the time allocation. Let's move on to the second round, whereupon every moderator, myself and Christine, will address one question to everyone to answer. There will be 2 minutes to answer that question. This time we'll start from the other end. Mr. Tsarukyan, I address this question to you. How do you intend to struggle against corruption and to develop the economy? 2 minutes to answer.
Okay, let me say, the most important thing is fighting against corruption. It's so necessary to increase the salary for our workers, starting with the government representatives and the teachers. So, I mean, if they get 600,000 Armenian drams as ministers, they cannot work for 600,000 drams. Or teachers get 80,000 drams. They cannot survive. Okay, they may wait like, I don't know, 1 month or 2 months or 3, but we, for example, in the budget, we have to manage it well and distribute well and give the corresponding salaries to corresponding people. That's the most important thing. You have to provide the necessary salaries to people so that they can take care of their families. The issue of corruption is very strict today, I understand, but I mean, people, we have to pay attention. We have to give the opportunity, like increase the budget and develop the economy and empower and develop, based on which the amount will increase and we will be able to fight against corruption in the fight. So that's so necessary for the economy. We have to have programs for the investment programs, for the natural resources and the resources. What we had based on that, programs have to be presented so that we don't ask the investors, but the investors come to ask us to invest in our country. So that the Ministry of Economy decides to choose among investors. Like there are 30-40 investors coming to the sector, they should decide which one to give the opportunity to, so that we make the choice. Because without, for example, investments, the corresponding environment has to be created, conditions have to be created, have to be suggested so that they come to us. The most important issue in development of the economy is this, so that we are able to provide, pay attention to the banking system, in the agriculture and small and medium enterprises, young families. There's not enough time, I'm sorry. Thank you. Mr. Tsarukyan, Mr. Avitisyan, the same question to you. Fighting corruption, economic development. Well, generally, there are quite specific tools, criteria, principles. When fighting corruption, I do not want to take more of your time to speak about that, like reducing risks, for example, proper income, change of mentality, change of culture, based on that mentality, etc. But if we're speaking about Armenia, and we are speaking about Armenia, then we have to take into account that corruption has been present in Armenia as the main mechanism of governance. It was a system establishing, or it was a part of the establishment of the public administration. So that is why it has to be eliminated. I mean, those mechanisms have to be destroyed. And the primary step here is the transitional justice and the responsibility that the corruptioners have to take on their shoulders. I mean, without doing that, without paying attention to the past, without a healthy evaluation of everything that has happened, to understand who was who and what they did, and they have to return what they peeled from this country. So we essentially have to base ourselves on the past and diagnose, because only after we understand what happened, we can diagnose the condition of the country, and then when we do that, we will be able to understand what our next steps should be, like what were the diseases identified, what had happened, and what should we do now in accordance with newly accepted criteria in order to contribute to the new situation in the country. That's what we give importance to, and the rest I think is quite clear to everyone. No secrets here, and this has been quite well tested in the whole world. Naturally, we're not reinventing the wheel.
Thank you, Mr. Avetissian. We all understand that 2 minutes are not sufficient to lay down the political programs and what you have to say, but we also understand that we enjoy the presence of 11 candidates, and our airtime is not indefinite. Mr. Baldasaryan, could you answer the same question within 2 minutes? Fighting corruption is of pivotal importance for Armenia because, according to international financial institutions' assessment, $30 billion have been robbed out of Armenia over these 30 years, and we need to establish an international investigative mechanism to launch a coordinated struggle against corruption, to identify the culprits and hold them liable. In Armenia, there are 730 mines. Most of these mines are registered in unknown offshore beneficiaries. We call upon to identify all beneficiary owners. $50 to $70 million worth of gold is exported out of Armenia. We could develop the jewelry business within Armenia. Why should this raw stuff be exported? The copper molybdenum combinate has $1 billion circulation turnover annually. They sold it for 132 million. I ask these rhetorical questions. Who is the owner of Nairit? Who pilfered Nairit? Why should the budget suffer? Who is the owner of the Vanadzor chemical industrial plant? It's being sold in the Spitak court as we speak for pennies. We believe that the anti-corruption struggle should be coordinated and continue, and should be result-oriented. Everybody knows in Armenia, it's common knowledge, that corruption deeds will be punished strictly. On the one hand, we should go ahead. On the other hand, we should examine this robbery, identify it and punish. This much for the economy. Armenia, over the 7 to 8 months, of course, it wasn't possible to clean up the Afghan stables over this period, but 8 months are sufficient to develop a strategic development vision for this country, and we hope that after the extraordinary elections this program will come about, because the situation of these people is extremely grave. 651,000 pensioners, 200,000 people with disability. Your time is out. You will have another opportunity. Thank you very much, Mr. Sargsyan. Your 2 minutes, please. The level of corruption, in order to reduce it, the best way is to have a powerful economy. First, you have to strengthen the economy. It should generate more revenue, and in percentage terms, the corruption will shrink. That's simple math. The second thing I'd like to say, and this will be corroborated by the Prime Minister AI, it's not possible to improve an individual sector as such, per se. In order to eradicate corruption, the Ministry of Culture should work well, the Ministry of Education should come up with issues. The cabinet is a team. either the cabinet works in the spirit of teamwork and every minister, every director, department does what they should and the corruption shrinks as a result, or it's the opposite. In general terms, every country should develop its economy, especially a country like ours, such as Armenia, which has two adversaries on its flanks. It has certain issues with the other neighbors. It should develop its human resources, its natural resources. Armenia is not a poor country. They have cheated us. They have cheated us that we do not have fossil fuel. We have much more than fossil fuel. The world is changing. The Azeri oil is running out. The British companies are leaving Azerbaijan. We could become a country with serious influence in the region if we consolidate our efforts, if we use our potential, all of us, to make this country a decent country. If we don't spend these funds on elections, but rather use it to get this country back on its feet. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sargsyan, for saving precious seconds again. Madam Harian, same question. Corruption and the economic development.
Thank you. You know, there is one very important point missed here. Very often we contract the perception of corruption, turning it into just bribes, giving bribes, taking bribes, election-related bribes, but corruption per se is quite an extensive concept. It also includes abuse of administrative power, also cronyism. So that is why fighting corruption should not be a part for the system. It should not be part of our mentality, as it has already been mentioned here, but it has to be preventive. For example, I'm sure that a lot of officials who hire people who are their kins or relatives, I mean, they consider it quite normal. They think that's how it has to be. You have to hire your relatives and kins to work for you. So that's why we have to take into account corruption and the extensive spectrum thereof. And first is prevention, and second is awareness raising. Of course, the situation that exists in Armenia now does not help fighting corruption, because we truly need to clean the system. To clean the system politically and economically, and the political part of it is not less important, because you remember it turned out that the Minister of Defense of Armenia was a citizen of another country. There's very little time. I'll just mention some additional points. In order to develop our economy, we have to get rid of this savage usury system that has devoured our banking system, because the banks have essentially extorted the financial means using in order to get super income. But finance is the blood of the system. We need to let that blood flow into our economy, and only then we will speak of economic development and consider some additional components in the tax administration, etc. Thank you, Mrs. Haroyan. The same question to you, Mr. Shirinyan, economy and corruption. Well, generally, the core here is not having modern statehood. Well, Armenia is a plutocratic society, essentially, a state of thieves, as Nigeria. Now the facade is clean, but in depth we haven't changed, because it resists like stone. This is what has to be eradicated, eliminated. In addition to that, building statehood has to be transferred to more modern parameters. If we do not pursue institutional change and express some institutional reform, then we would not succeed. So the parliamentarism that had to serve the best opportunity for that had to develop democracy at the same time. Publicity is a part of democracy. If everything's public, then issue is solved, or at least the start is there. Second, we need some understandable laws, because the laws that we have now contribute to corruption. They create conducive environment for corruption. I simply want to say that an institutional approach is important, but an institutional approach in a state of law, because the law prevails, and sanctions have to be applied by 100%, which is the objective approach. There are also subjective approaches here. We have to return the national system of values. We know that Armenians have always been diligent, honest, and now abroad Armenians are known for their diligence and honesty. They haven't earned their image as thieves, and that is why we have to change the system of values to include all the expressions thereof. Also, the best traditions have to be promoted. Integrity, honesty, dignity have to return.
Բայց դա հատային պայքար է, որպես իրավապաշտպան կարող եմ ասել, կոռուպցիայի դեմ պայքարի համար մեզ պետք է առողջ քաղաքական համակարգ։ Տեսեք, մարդիկ խոսում են կոռուպցիայի դեմ պայքարի մասին, թալանի մասին, բայց նույն թալանի տարիներին այնպիսի պաշտոններ են զբաղեցրել, որ իրենց պաշտոնով կարող էին պայքարել, կարող էին բացահայտել, թե ով ինչի տերն է, ով ինչն է թալանել, ով ինչն է կերել, ով ինչ է արել։ Հետևաբար մեզ համար կոռուպցիայի դեմ պայքարը դա գործ է, տեքստ չէ։ Եվ մենք գործով ենք ցույց տվել, եւ գործով ցույց ենք տվել 5-րդ գումարման խորհրդանու որպես անկախ պատգամավոր, 6-րդ գումարման խորհրդանու որպես ելք դաշինքի պատգամավոր եւ ցույց ենք տալու 7-րդ գումարման խորհրդանում հակակոռուպցիոն ունիվերսալ մինիստրացիան դոպինգ անելով եւ այնպիսի շահերի բախման օրենսդրություն որ այն մարդիկ
to develop such a legislation in the conflict of interest that those who are really in conflict of interest should not end up in the parliament. Those who clearly have enrich themselves unjustly should not end up in the political system and should not pervert it through their presence. About economic development, you know, we look at the debates of economists, they come up with convoluted texts, but there is one thing that's obvious. Our farmer cannot sell his beef through our retail because from Brazil and India there's cheap veal coming in and they can't do anything. So our farmers' produce is not protected. We will develop such a legislation for our farmers to be protected. The farmers today cannot sell their milk. There is milk powder entering the country and no one precludes that. Today milk is cheaper than water. We will come up with bills for the producer, for workers, for farmers, for self-employed in the cities, for SMEs to be developed, protected. Thank you, Mr. Marukian. Mr. Pashinyan, you also have 2 minutes to answer the same question. Thank you. Let me first note that systemic corruption has been eradicated in Armenia, and today in fighting corruption we have unprecedented processes underway in Armenia. One, we have identified the biggest corrupt transactions in the history of the Third Armenian Republic, and I'm certain there will be yet newer corrupt transactions identified, and the funds stolen, the assets stolen will be returned to the state and the people. We have eliminated one of the most important types of corruption, vote buying, and I believe within the last 7 months this is one of the most important accomplishments. And in general, fighting corruption, first and foremost, you need the political will. We believe that today's government does have this political will. The people have this political will, and yes, we do need to put in place mechanisms for to set up a standalone universal anti-corruption body before which every politician and statesman should submit a declaration for his or her assets to be sought after throughout the world. No official should be able to hide whatever assets in any offshore, and will follow this up. As for the economy, let me quote some statistics first. Over these 10 months, there is 6.6% economic growth in Armenia. Exports have increased by 11%. This year, in the month of October, for the first time ever within the last 10 plus years, maybe in the whole history of the Third Republic, the industrial production, the light industry production, exports have exceeded that of mining product. This is one of the most important indicators. Tourism has increased by 8.8%. Exports of agricultural produce have increased by 61%. Agro-produce exports have increased by 8%, and it's going to continue to grow. Thank you, Mr. Pashinyan. Mr. Rostamian, same question, economic development and anti-corruption fight. I have to first say that these truths are absolute truths. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. If we want to fight real corruption, we need to very well understand that this cannot be handled by the government. It has to be done by an institutional independent body. As soon as the government gets in, apparently it turns out there's no corruption, it's been eradicated, and you fight not against the current incumbents, but those of the past. In order to see whether there is corruption in the country, this has to be done by an independent, standalone agency, which is why the entire world insists that this be done by the civil society and the opposition. They should take the reins and assess whether there is or not corruption. The authorities, incumbent authorities, are always inclined to cover this up. It's not in their interest. This is a fact. It's been like that in the past. It's like now. Before, irrespective of the person of the prime minister and the trust towards him. As for the economy, we have a clear article 11 of the Constitution, which states our economic order is a social market economy. This is what we need to bring to life. This is the German model. That is, when we opted for this logic of the economic order, we clearly assumed the following. The government must have a clear role to play, both in ensuring the economic growth and both, which is most important, to redistribute the national product so that the social issues are addressed and resolved. The second pivotal issue, we're today in a blockade, we're a country at a war. We have to do everything for our economy to have a clear direction of development. It's the development of military industrial complex, raising the level of self-sufficiency, reducing the costs. This is what our economy should be hinged upon. Failing that, given the challenges we have in the economy, we will not be able to strengthen to the extent to overcome this. Thank you, Mr. Rostamian.
Mr. Sarkyan, you have the 2 minutes to answer the same question. The problem in Armenia is establishing the institutional framework in fighting corruption. We think that arrests and scandalous trials are just the last phase, the last round of fighting corruption. First of all is anti-corruption education, then come the preventive measures, and then in the end, the inevitability of the punishment. So, in this respect, the effective solution of the problems Armenia is facing may be done through establishment of an anti-corruption body that may embrace also some investigative part in it and intelligence. We should say corruption is a social phenomenon, and even the strictest methods of applying force would not be effective in eradicating it. Instead, we may eliminate reasons that give birth to corruption. For example, vulnerable social conditions, ineffective public administration, discretionary decisions, arbitrariness in public administration. This is with regards to the struggle against corruption in the future. We're thinking that in 30 years we have essentially given space to a large amount of illicit assets obtained through corrupt means. We may provide amnesty in form of return of the property. You still have 21 seconds. Yes, I'll be very brief. The public administration system is a quite influential factor that establishes a system worth attention. In this respect, we can see the following vectors in public administration. Thank you, Mr. Sarkyan. And finally, Mr. Sarkyan, it's your turn. Thank you. In the speech of mine, I said that unfortunately the team of Pashinyan comes to elections not with professionals, but people who simply have certain ideological agreement, and I may say that Mr. Prime Minister is simply getting the wrong reports. That's why he mentions the figures he mentions. I think your team has to work better. Now, these are the figures. The 6% that you just mentioned is here. You took the will in with 10-11%, you have 6%, and you are bragging, which is bad. Now, a cumulative increase of import to the country. You see, you took the term with 49, now you're on 25%, but the issue of exports is even worse. From 36%, you got to 15. I don't know, do the cameramen manage to show all this information? These are the real figures. The figures you say are real because you say them, but they do not express the reality. This is the industry. See how it grew last year? Every month, starting from the 5th month, you're around 4.5%. And this is construction that you're so pleased with, and this is the real situation by months. So there is growth, but very bad dynamics, meaning really the trend is so. This is the agriculture, the most ignominious situation here with -8% in development. This is how you've taken the term with 2.5% of growth, now -8. You know why it is so? Because your professionals have given you the wrong information. You didn't release the water from Sevan, from some populistic regions. Reasons, I'm sorry, now there is drought. Fight against corruption has to be made much more systemically. I mean, if you're doing it the way you're doing, then Armenia will come to very close to zero growth. Rules of the game. We have been doing rules of the game. Now the legislation that you have gives you the best opportunity. I hope you use it in the best way. Thank you. Now we'll turn to the second question. This question of our interest, apparently, of our concern, most important question: how do you see the regulation perspective for the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh? What are your approaches to the security, to guaranteeing security for Armenia and Artsakh? Mr. Sargsyan, we finished with you and with the previous question. Now you start with the next question, answering respectively.
With great pleasure. I believe that our fundamental approaches are well known. I believe that we should continue with a great emphasis on modernizing our armed forces. We have developed and put in circulation a 7-year program for modernization, step by step, with all the things that needs to be done. I hope that these steps are being implemented as we speak. I've mentioned many times that I shall not reflect on the performance indicators of the army for reasons well known, but I would like to express a hope that this is the case. I believe that we should really pay great attention to our approaches. First and foremost, the political discourse domestically should not disclose things to our adversaries. I do not believe that we could get good conditions for the development of the army by calling Aliyev a well-educated person after an encounter in the elevator, whereas speaking in a threatful tone to the same to one's own officer corps or to Artsakh. I believe we should quickly change the situation in the wake of elections. Failing that, we shall have serious hazards and threats upon us. We should really understand that we have committed serious mistakes in the meantime. The biggest, in my assessment, is the losing of the office of the Secretary General of the CSTO, and your dialogue between yourself and the Press Secretary of the Russian Federation. I do not think it brings honor upon us. I think we have an issue with our building proper relations with our allies and explaining to our partners as to where is the red line that we will not cross, including in our dealings with our neighbors. We cannot shut the borders when we're told to, or open them when we're allowed to, because this is our lifeline that has to be respected. Thank you, Mr. Sargsyan. Mr. Sargsyan, how does your political party see the prospect of the resolution of the Karabakh issue and the security of Artsakh and Armenia? As for the resolution of the Artsakh issue, first and foremost, we should get back to the origins of this state. I would like to identify the legal uncertainty and sloppiness that exists in our relations. On the one hand, our independence declaration and the constitution are based on the 1989 December 1 decision of uniting Artsakh with Armenia. On the other hand, we present ourselves as two different distinct states. A question may arise: why this was not paid proper attention to back then? I think the answer is clear. Back then, the basic legal documents and instruments were taken as they are taken nowadays. Today, representative of one of the parties claims what's the big deal if the constitution is illegitimate? What matters is that it's the best in Europe. And recently, one of the first persons in the country claimed that the constitution is new and we have to let it settle down without accounting for its false nature. As a result of this legal confusion, right here we are going to express opposing opinions, but there is a simple question. What are, after all, the borders of Armenia may divide us? Returning to the resolution of the issue, we believe that until such time as when we decide what is Artsakh for us, is it a second Armenian state or is it an indivisible part of Armenia, we will not get anywhere near the solution. Upon self-determination and after taking sovereign decisions, I am certain the international community shall respect this decision. Run out of time. You still have 10 seconds. I won't make it anyway. Thank you very much for respecting the time limit. Mr. Rustamian, what's your vision, your take 2 minutes?
Well, given it's 2 minutes, I'll be very clear. The ARF considers the issue of Karabakh is the issue number one. This is the sacred issue for us. How we see the solution, I don't think we need to ever ask that question, how it should be solved. We see it the way the people of Artsakh see it. People of Artsakh, well, I've mentioned specifically Article 175 of the Constitution with black on white saying that before the territorial integrity of Karabakh is restored and adjustment thereby, the administration will take place in the territory that is by fact under the authority of Artsakh, which means that the status quo that exists at this moment and may not change unless the Republic of Artsakh is recognized per se with the independence thereof and the territorial integrity thereof is restored. Just for your information, I should say that this is not about the autonomous oblast of Nagorno-Karabakh, but Nagorno-Karabakh Republic that is, as it is now, plus the Shaumian region. And today, we have about 701 square kilometers of area under the control of Azerbaijan, conquered by Azerbaijan. So when people of Artsakh speak of restoration, that's what they mean. They have the issue of restoring their territorial integrity. So respectively, the negotiations have to be guided by this principle and not, it's not that we have to be deciding now what solutions we should bring before the people and serve. I've been saying that all the time. I mean, you'll have the opportunity to ask the question. Well, provided we spoke already of this, it would truly be better if everyone speaks about this. So, shall we follow the logic of Article 175 or not? You may ask that question later. Mr. Pashinyan, the same question to you. Karabakh regulation and security. Very well, I'm very grateful. First of all, I'd like to note at what term or in which time our government has taken the will to make decisions in a situation in which Armenia was essentially compelled to make decisions diminishing our power there in Karabakh. This is the place where the former government had already abandoned the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh. Our position is quite clear. We have always said that everyone has to very clearly note that no one should consider Armenia the addressee of the question of whether you are ready for compromise. We can say very clear, has anyone asked Azerbaijan whether they are ready for compromise? Provided Azerbaijan has never heard that question, yet no one may pose that question before Armenia either. The next point, we think that the Republic of Artsakh has to be a party of negotiations, and without the voice of Artsakh, without the full-fledged enrollment of them as a party in negotiations, any solution through regulation of the issue is not possible. And ultimately, the one to decide is the people of Armenia in the first place, and the people of Artsakh. Without people, no solution will be possible. As regards the Secretary General of the CSTO, there were some false achievements pronounced hereby when he was the representative of Armenia under the auspices of which the CSTO countries essentially hearing refuted Armenia would empower Azerbaijan. This is truly embarrassing for Armenia, and Armenia is going to present its position and compare it to the former government. We're not going to stay silent and submissive observers, to just observe how people work for the sake of our national interests. Thank you, Mr. Pashinyan. I may suppose that we will still speak of these issues. Mr. Marukyan.
Dear compatriots, the issues of Artsakh and security are interrelated, essentially. The security of borders of Artsakh and Republic of Armenia, for this it's very important for us to have powerful economy. Only army anchored to powerful economy may, during the negotiations over Artsakh, can have a solution beneficial for Armenia. A weak Armenia, a weak economy, weak army cannot act to the benefit of Armenia. The issues of the security of Armenia, security of Karabakh is not just words. We have to do everything for our soldiers, 18, 19 years of age, be removed from the front line to be controlled in such a way as for the manpower to be away from the snipers of the adversary hordes. We have to augment our armed forces with professional regiments in Tavush, in Artsakh, in Agarak border with Nakhichevan, those borders. As for the Armenian security, we have many issues today. We have inherited those issues essentially because today, at this point, for example, we have 30,000 officers. Some of them are retiring, some are still in service, who need apartments. They still lease their apartments. They have been serving in the army for 20 years, retire and continue to live on rent. There are many issues that challenge the state. The solution can only be found through a powerful economy. As for the general regulation of the Artsakh issue, we recognize the Minsk co-chairs of OSCE as the only legitimate body format. We recognize Artsakh as part of the negotiations. In every solution, Artsakh must have its voice and participation. The same pertains to the constitution. I agree with the previous reference. I have to say that between Azerbaijan and Armenia, the military balance has been disrupted. And it should be restored. Failing that, at least the situation that we have now is impermissible. The balance has to be restored through the strengthening of our economy. Thank you, Mr. Marokyan. Mr. Shirnyan, your turn. I have to tell you and our compatriots that the issue of Artsakh has been the subject of most speculation so far. As far as I remember, discussions about handing over Artsakh have been continuing, but the territorial positions remain the same. If you discuss in theory the issues that have been proposed around Artsakh, they will not lead to the resolution. Territorial integrity, right to self-determination in conditions of peace. This is the road that leads to war. It's going to become recurrent and so forth. Here's what I propose. We should, alongside continuing this negotiation process, we need to rethink its format. We have a certain conservatism against change in our mindset. New proposals, new recommendations are very rare, and you see the discussions go with difficulty. So I propose concurrently to launch the following, presumably on the level of the foreign ministry. The issue of Artsakh should be transferred to 1960 December 24. UN General Assembly resolution on granting freedom to colonized nations. There's been additional rationale and the complete justification for that. We should move this onto the plane where you insist that the negotiating party should be Artsakh equally among others. In these conditions, the conflict between Artsakh will be the fight against the metropolis. There's been dozens of states that have attained their independence in the 60s through this medium. So I fail to understand why do we keep avoiding this dimension. Apparently, it's the time to change this format and to switch to this solution. Thank you, Mr. Shirinyan. Madam Aroyan, your response to these two questions.
Well, you see, the issue of Artsakh has apparently been one of the most important ones, of course, the solution to which has always been evading us. We've been deceived. We suddenly found from the coverage of foreign media that Sargsyan was ready to sign under a document that's supposed handover of liberated areas. It turns out that, well, first of all, you have to diagnose the disease to treat the patient correctly. You have to understand in what situation the negotiations are, where we have gone with them. And this is where I remember words of Mr. Pashinyan when he was saying that he knows such truth that he was thinking whether to disclose them or not. I suppose they were mostly related to the issue of Artsakh. The solution we propose radically develops and differs from the suggestions of other political parties, provided we're still in negotiations, we keep the status quo. But at the same time, we empower Artsakh. First of all, the borderline shall be equipped with the state-of-art equipment so that the casualties are brought to the minimum. Second, we have to enforce Artsakh, empower Artsakh, repopulate it. And here there are some very absurd criteria, like construction materials from Armenia to Artsakh is taxed 20%. Naturally, building a house in Artsakh is more expensive than in Yerevan. This is absurd, really. Artsakh has to be empowered economically, and then only a referendum can be held in Artsakh and in Hayastan in Armenia. So this is the question that we have to ask. Do you want to unite with Armenia? I suppose they will answer yes. And the referendum in Armenia, whether you want to accept Artsakh, I think this artificial, well, I'm sorry, but your time is up. We have to keep up to the rules. And Mr. Sargsyan, now the turn is yours. Issue of Karabakh, the security of two Armenian states. Well, the issue of security is the main issue in order to provide the best solution in the interests of Armenia to Artsakh. Countries that have real influence, United States, Russia, and France, as the only country representing Europe on that level, they only co-chair dealing with the issue of Artsakh in the Minsk Group. And the Minsk Group negotiates with the Supreme Command and of the two countries, and the presidents and the heads of the two countries. They have very serious influence, and every word they say may clearly disturb the process. I know the phased or incremental solutions of Leventer Petrosyan, the one proposed by Robert Kocharian. I also know the Madrid principles discussed in the Minsk Group. I may see there are very few possibilities to reinvent the wheel. The problem is in the main thread. I trust the acting government at this moment. I think that all these speculations about handing over Artsakh are not well grounded. Now, as regards the constitution and the corresponding article about the security, I think we have a serious problem here. And Mr. Rustamyan has to tell his very precious Russia that they should not be selling smerch to Azerbaijan or Polonaise to Azerbaijan. We have to increase our cooperation platform with NATO, participate in drills, learn of the tactics there with additional 20,000 professional military service to be enrolled, and a number of other issues. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sargsyan. You ended in the right time as always.
Your turn, Mr. Baldasaryan. Thank you. The fundamental issue of Nagorno-Karabakh is a pan-Armenian, pan-national issue. We come up with a very clear position to resolve it. The Nagorno-Karabakh issue can be resolved by the Armenian nation through a referendum. There are no other mechanisms. No other power in Armenia is in a position to resolve the Karabakh issue. Neither anything over the grapevine can generate any benefit. We are for active involvement of Nagorno-Karabakh in the negotiation process. We are for the OSCE Minsk group format to stay in place. We are for effective negotiations taking place, and then the Nagorno-Karabakh issue should become not the property of a couple of people covered up by the state secret, but keeping in as much as practicable the nuances of the negotiation process which is necessary. You have to involve as broad as possible strata of the population in the negotiation process. The society should know, there should be debates, discussions with the people, with students, with academics, involving everyone. This should not be a covered up discussion. As for security matters, we consistently, persistently are for Armenia's military political cooperation with the CSTO. We believe that Armenian-Russian relations should progressively and persistently develop, not because there are 3 million Armenians living in the territory of the Russian Federation, but because the Russian Federation has an intergovernmental agreement with the Republic of Armenia, and together with the armed forces of Armenia is called upon to ensure the security of the Republic of Armenia. And myself, I would like to reflect on what you said, Mr. Markan. I was the Secretary of the National Security Council. I've done a lot in my struggle against corruption, as much as I could, and there was a little conflict at the end, which, in view of which I left. And if the Metsamor nuclear power plant has not been privatized, that's because of my public statement. You will have an opportunity to address a specific question to Mr. Marukian in the next round. Thank you very much. You will have this opportunity in the next round. What's your position about Karabakh and security? I'll begin with foreign relations. The foreign relations system should be completely revamped, reviewed, revisited. We have to diversify the system of our foreign relations. The unilateral dependence should be replaced by well-balanced and mutually beneficial cooperation system with all those players who exist here in the region, in particular the USA, Iran, and also China, India, our neighbor Georgia, of course. Quite naturally, dignified relations should be reestablished with Russia. That's about foreign relations. In view of shortness of time, I will not dwell further. As for the issue of Artsakh, we should quit doing certain things. Harming ourselves, deceiving ourselves, we should quit. We should attempt to take the path of reality. The reality is that the first Armenian Republic was divided through aggression between Lenin and Ataturk, and subsequent alliance and treaties they concluded. And definitely this, what we call the Third Republic, our current state, in reality there is no Third Republic because there was no Second Republic to speak of. We have to turn this into a truly new republic based on the legacy of the First Republic, thereby reassuming our inalienable rights, leaning not on Lenin-Ataturk alliance and Moscow and Kars treaties, but recognize them null and void in their part that pertains to us. And we should depart from the title that was put in place by the Paris summit and the Wilson Arbitration Award. Artsakh, only through taking Artsakh in as a province in Armenia we can resolve this. There is no Artsakh nation, there is the Armenian nation, one unified nation. Let's not deceive ourselves. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Tsarukyan, your position. Thank you. The guarantor of the security of Artsakh and Armenia is our triumphant army, which has always been in the focus of our attention. Moreover, if we want to implement our desires, our wishes, we should pay great attention. We should arm the army. We should develop the military industry, that which is necessary, let's assume, to be used in war. Rather than complaining that we run out of stuff, it's not there since the war is still waging. We have to develop the military industry, yes, and what matters most, like I just said, our 18-year-old young people should not be at the front line. They lack experience. They have to be respectively commissioned officers, contractual servicemen, and their number should increase to resolve these issues. The main issue here, yes, we need to develop the economy. We should have a powerful economy, a strong state to be able to resolve our issues. We should not just keep saying and just having it penned on paper. We have to discuss this full-fledged. We have to go after that which yields returns, which gives benefits. Any budget appropriation should be used for its purpose. Like every person uses his or her personal budget for the proper ends. It has to be efficient, it has to be noticeable, salient, and the Armenian nation, all of these issues that we are concerned about should be resolved. I want to say about Karabakh, since there is lack of time, the issue of Karabakh has already been resolved by our nation. It just remains for it to be internationally recognized, and if international recognition is there, that will be the end of it. And the international recognition will only be there if we are powerful, because they always take notice of strong people.
Thank you. Now we turn to debates. I suppose the most expected part of the discussion today, but before we start, let me remind you of the rules. Each of the participants, with his or her preference, may address a question to another participant. 1 minute for the question and 2 minutes for the answer, and then another minute to respond to the answer to the question. And then if the other participants have things to say, we'll have about 5-minute debates in which all may participate. Or the two parties may come in if the others don't have things to say. All right, we start from this end now. Mr. Tsarukyan, your turn respectively. You may ask your question to every or to any participant, but please not longer than 1 minute. Of course, I want to address my question to Mr. Avetisyan. I heard these days him saying that these parliamentary elections have no life, when the whole world is just following everything that takes place in Armenia, and everyone is so concerned. Some of our partners are also interested, saying people are going for parliamentary elections, wasting time, and you just predict that it will be as long as 1 year or year and a half. Why, Mr. Avetisyan? Yes, thank you for the question. We are sure our forecast is that the parliament that will be established from this situation with some criminal connotations in the electoral code, and generally in a situation with so many problems, an elected parliament may not have a longer life, because we will have a parliament that will not have enough sufficient ability to overcome challenges we're facing now. Respectively, we have presented a 2-year transitional program. We're still thinking about this process as transitional in general, and that's the reasoning that we have taken in order to tackle the issue. That's the simple reason we say objectively. I mean, it's not that we may not afford any ambitions here, but just objective circumstances will ultimately result in that situation. Everyone has to be ready. That's why we suggest making such steps that we're really ready to that, without any shocks, and smoothly we should move towards that goal. It would be great if the political powers were up to developing a new constitutional reform and a new electoral code, completely different reasoning, and a new law about political parties, of course, through making corresponding steps towards development of the economy. Simply for the whole country and the political system to get itself ready for the second phase, to just enter that situation. Otherwise, we think we will have problems. Of course, it's not a disastrous situation. Problems may still be solved, but just to be calmer and be more effective, we would suggest it happens that way. We want to respond. Well, no elections yet happening, and I just don't want to say anything. But if that's the decision they make, then there are certain differences in opinions inside their own team. For example, Pavlik Manukyan says something in opposite. Pavlik is not a member of the political party. Well, some other members, for example, Araik's brother from the rating. Araik's brother has left for personal reasons, but he just supports another candidate. He's not left the process. Now, I'm just saying that you can still make a decision. But I said preliminarily that we're not making decisions instead of people. People will make decisions. Okay, we'll see. We suggest, we forecast. We may make forecasts. That's our right to express our opinions. We express opinions. I can answer, Mr. Tsarukian. Well, but you're saying development, investments in such a situation, when you predict a year and a half for the new parliament, no one will make investments. No, you're wrong. Well, we continue the debates, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. If you have your opinions, please come in. All right, then let us now start the debate. And if you have things to say, please. Will this parliament work for 5 years or shorter? Please. Mr. Pashinyan, 5 minutes. It is so important that political stability results in economic stability, and the economic revolution may take place in political stability. Of course, if it is necessary, the Constitution will always allow, and the laws would always allow to go for some snap, extraordinary decisions, but the long-term vision should be democratic, legal stability that will create the favorable conditions for economic revolution. It should not happen in a stress. We do not need economic stress, investment stress with pessimistic forecasts. So pessimism is not in the right place now. I think the elected parliament will take the whole term and work for the whole term and create the conducive investment environment. Thank you, Mr. Sargsyan, please. Please be brief. Yes, I will. I remember the meetings of yours in the political party of yours, and there was only temporary solutions. Apparently, temporariness is a part of your operational mode, and times have changed. And please come up with some more substantial suggestions. It's the right time for those. Well, I think that Armenia is now going through a historical period. We have to establish such a parliament, such a political system that simply whittles these types of conversations out. Because it turns out that we don't have anything to do but just think about elections once every 2 years. If we have a healthy political system, we might never need that. We're going to do that. That's what we're going to do in the parliament. If there is such an agenda, I'm going to oppose, definitely, personally as well. Mr. Rustaman, you know, I may understand, trying to get why you've brought this up, because there's this strategic litigation thing, like a precedent, like if it's been possible once, and everyone's thinking, why couldn't it be possible again? In such a situation, the revolution taking place, the parliament still in force, with snap elections taking place, happening in result of a revolution. When there were people striving for that inside and outside the government. So everything that has happened has to be properly perceived. We have to remember what it was based on. If we don't understand it well, and we think all the time that the country has to be developed into some unsustainable, not stable situations, then maybe a different revolution they would like to decide to commit here, to implement here, maybe a little more violent. Well, there is the theory of shattered glass in districts where windows are broken, crime rate grows because it is just enough to apply coercive measures against someone to vote for someone else, and that will be enough. So I think the solution is to have a balanced parliament. We can see the consensus around the idea of revolution, with some ideas of Mr. Pashinyan brought ahead. I think it is so important to have the power in the parliament that's going to bring the balance before the ruling party. If Mr. Pashinyan changes the whole list of the party and brings some 50 other people, then the substance will not change. We're creating now a parliament of one person, not one political power. If we don't bring a balance or counterweight to that, we may have a problem. There is one very important thing we are missing, all of us are missing. We've heard from the revolution that the electoral code had to be amended first, which was not done. I will not be afraid to say that the previous criminal parliament just debated the adoption of that law, of that code. And I mean, the parliament. At the same time, we're getting really an exceptional chance to do this without vote buying and election-related corruption. Nevertheless, these elections are not going to express the will of the people 100% because we didn't remove the political framework from the dominance of capital. You see these posters all around the city, the huge amounts spent in electoral campaigns. What do you think? Your time is up, I'm sorry. You now have to address your question to any other candidates.
I cannot respond. Well, maybe in response to your question. You have 1 minute. Within that minute, you can both respond or ask a question. Whoever has to answer will have 2 minutes. My question I would like to address to distinguished Mr. Pashinyan. Mr. Pashinyan, we are certain that it is impossible to take the justice system that is the legacy of the past government and with it to implement the program of fighting corruption and other programs that you submit as well. We are certain that this could only happen in conditions and through the transitional justice. Do you agree with this? And if not, then what's your rationale? Frankly speaking, I myself and our party have spoken about transitional justice many times, about the mechanisms thereof, and there are also international organizations with which we've had contacts around this subject, and of course this is a very important topic, and I think, yes, also considering the current state of our judicial system, we should seriously discuss the possibility of working with the toolkit of transitional justice, having a truly, and the possibilities of creating a truly independent judicial system. Since I only have 80 seconds left, I would like to get back to the subject of the economy. When in the past they said that there was 11% economic growth in the country, what did it consist of? Gambling offices, mining resources, that is exporting our ore, and it was exports mostly, and then when there was growth demonstrated in construction by the previous government, it was just one facility. It was the Amulsar controversial mine construction only. So we now have the objective of restructuring the economy and the economic growth. Today, real products are exported out of this country, which have a labor component and which has a true added value in it. We do not extract the ore and export it. We create value from scratch and export it. We also launched in this country the serious industrial shift which is underway in the country. I'm glad that today we inaugurated a plant when they will be assembling Armenian TV sets sometime down the road. Thank you. Mr. Avdesyan, you have 1 minute. Thank you for the answer. We cherish a great hope that once, as a result of the elections, the Red will end up in the parliament as the second pole therein. Through our efforts, we shall maximize the opportunities presented by transitional justice, and we shall assure its full-fledged deployment. That is, criminal collusion shall be detected, identified, it will be subjected to operational political illustration, everything that's been robbed will be returned, and we shall have a baseline to take the country forward therefrom. I shall use the remaining seconds. There was an impression created, or was an attempt to create the impression that we, the Pan-Armenian Party, are attempting to incite artificial processes. No, dear gentlemen and dear people, we do see the future. We see it based on impartial realities, and we make our prognosis on the basis of that. We have to get ready for that, just get ready for it. So be brief so that everyone else can speak. Since I affirm the need for serious judiciary reform and transitional justice, I also reaffirm that, yes, as a result of fighting corruption and also using the toolkit of transitional justice, the amounts robbed from the country and the people shall be returned and first and foremost put to the service of the subsequent development of our armed forces. Yes, our armed forces, as of 2018, have lost within the last decade the fragile military balance that had existed with Azerbaijan. Our priority issue is to put this military balance back in place. Reflecting on the economic subjects, I would like to say this following. There are issues about agriculture and irrigation. Certain people in Armenia for many years have been using irrigation water on the expense of common farmers and villagers. The water system of Armenia was not even possible to estimate what were the needs. Certain people, in order to cover up their corrupt mechanisms, unfortunately have been reporting false data about the irrigation needs and also about the area of cultivated land. Mr. Pashinyan, you were to answer the question, but let's afford others the possibility. Mr. Rostomyan, transitional justice is a very sensitive issue. You have to tread very carefully here. If we think to implement it, it should never replace justice per se. It should not replace the courts. We should not have new troikas in place. It's more important for us to see how far back it will stretch. If it's going to start in the wake of independence and discuss everything that transpired since, that's acceptable for us, because we have questions about this period. Because our leader Harayt Marukyan was expelled in '92, our party papers were shut down, people were put in jail. So will this transitional justice also reflect on those issues? I can affirm that yes. Very well, brilliant. If that's going to happen, it should not be selective. The period should not be selective. We haven't taken part in anything. If that's how you're going to do it, then we're in for trouble. I referred to the new wire. There was a reference to new wiretaps. We already have transitional justice. It goes through the National Security Service head and the General Prosecutor and the Prime Minister. The Troika is already there. They decide who should be put in jail, what should the court decide. Apparently, had such a decision been taken, 90% of your party would have already ended up in jail. And it's not impossible that you would also be there. But I would like to tell you that your aides already gave you the wrong statistics about the service sector in the economy. The gambling bets that you referred to, it was not in the expense of the bets, but the services that hundreds of big companies in the IT sector have been working, being the regional leader offering these services to other countries. There's a big distinction here. So before taking that decision, please instruct your aides to give you the proper statistics, because there are young talented boys and girls who get high wages in the IT sector. One of the biggest accomplishments incidentally of our government was that IT accounted for 4% in the GDP. That's the highest international standard. There are thousands of jobs awaiting well-educated boys and girls to get employed. But there was 36% of the withholding tax there to shut up I believe. And your economy was based on gambling. It was a gambling economy and exporting the mining product. I am surprised that you raised the question about transitional justice, Mr. Avedisyan, because you have been set free under the old judicial system, which is still incumbent. Transitional justice is about reconciliation and peace. your group has killed a police colonel. Have you reconciled? I haven't heard the word of atonement from you. Didn't you kill a police officer or a common citizen, an officer in duty? Doesn't matter what regime it was under. I believe so. We add 2 minutes for everyone to get an opportunity to speak. We will, if you have the political will, you can resolve issues under the current judicial system as well. Well, yes, the transitional justice should cover us also. As for the pilfered amounts, yes, there was robbery, there was, I think, the armed forces, Mr. Pashinyan, I just propose here and now, everything that's returned from the robbed assets should be spent on Gyumri and Vanadzor disaster zone rebuilding. The apartments should be bought in the secondary market. The shanty towns should be pulled down. Mr. Baghdasaryan, Mr. Baghdasaryan, please, you have some time. The people knows who killed whom. Dear compatriots, I believe that transitional justice should have in its focus and as one of its components the reconciliation of the society. In the political terms, the lustration could be the most important event. I believe, and then it should be followed by reconciliation. See how harmoniously you and Mr. Moroccan and myself come up with the same formula, a joint formula about those three components. You speak about the economy. We should really diversify our economy. The state should be more proactive, aggressive in the good sense of the word. In societies that are efficiently managed, there are two types of the government. One government says, I have nothing to do with it, the business is free, do what you want. The second model also gives business a degree of leeway. Economic liberties are more important than many governmental interventions. You will have an opportunity in the second round. You have a question, we should talk about coordinated economic policy. I apologize, Mr. Shirinyan. In the next round, you can reflect also on this issue. No problem with that whatsoever. Mr. Baghdasaryan, I will yield. Yes, they will start the next time. Let's agree. You just respond and then we will proceed thereby. The government has the issue with the independence of courts. If the Institute of Independent Courts were to mature, every issue would have been resolved. The rest is with the extraordinary parliamentary elections that depends on nothing else than social class development. There may be contradictions, the issue will move, failing that, I don't think there is an issue with this. So let's move ahead. Thank you. Mr. Baghdasaryan, this is, you can address this to anyone. Who do you want to address your question? It will be a rhetorical question, and there is a possibility. Who do you address it? I address it to all of our partners. Let's talk during these 5 minutes, if possible, about the situation in the banking sector. Dear compatriots, recently our neighbor Georgia, after a serious research, annulled all of the loans to 650,000. This is a real pest for our society. This is a rhetorical question addressed to anyone. What are the steps we need to take in order to be able to make the situation healthy in the banking system? 1.5 million people are hostage to banks, pawn shops, and credit institutions. What's the policies that you see to resolve this?
Well, ladies first, as they say, provided there is no specific answer to this question. We may discuss now for 7 minutes, given that we have saved some time for the previous question answer. Thank you. In my answer related to the economic bloc, I already mentioned that our political party considers the eradication of usury captivity in which our economy rests. It's not by chance that there are over 20 banks in a small country like Armenia with so many pawn shops and credit organizations growing like mushrooms after rain. This means that the blood of the economy, the finance that has to serve the economic purposes, serves the super income of several people. Before we solve this problem, we may not record any progress in our economy. This is the mechanism our political party suggests, provided we're more socially inclined. We think that the state is responsible for the social security of its citizens. Respectively, the state has to apply all the legislative leverage and force the banks to have special types of loans in the loan portfolios. Therefore, you'll have the time to continue that thread. Mr. Shirinyan, please. Yes, as regards the banking system, I suppose I will be now speaking on behalf of a number of people when I say that the issue of the banks is not interests. This is speculative capital, depleting one. Banks have to promote development of industry. Our banks do not promote development of industry. Their inclinations is completely different. They have to restore industry, industrial sectors, banks. That's what banks have to contribute to. Ask the businesses and you will see what the banks do to them. Banks do not only allow development, but they also hamper development, I should say. Thank you, Mr. Shirinyan. Let's go one by one. Mr. Marikan, turns yours. You know, to be very brief, this is very popular to criticize the banks, to hit the banks, because that emanates from the heart of our people. But I should say, ultimately, our banking system is quite a stable one, and it is due to this system that we still have no significant fluctuations in our currency compared to the US dollars. There's cheap money in the world. We should bring that money to Armenia and give cheap loans to people. Why would you complain of the banking system? Maybe it's expensive, all right, loans are expensive because the risks are high. When you speak of a year and a half of new parliament, that risk grows, by the way. Should not just saying populistic things, we should destroy banks and do things like that, and I don't know what. Statements like this may significantly contribute to such destructive situations that you forecast in them. I just want to come back to the but very briefly, please. I want to come back to the figures. We spoke of blacklists. 125,000 people have now been released from those blacklists. The credit history has been cleaned for 125,000 people. I'd like to add that this is also related to those 50,000 citizens that had to pay 13 billion Armenian drams as fines, with some accounts frozen, and compulsory enforcement of judicial acts was also establishing its own blacklist. These people have been removed from blacklists already. And an additional observation to what you said, there is a very clear process we can see when the banking system really funds the industry. Today, I was witnessing the opening of this factory that produces household equipment. It was established due to those loans taken from banks. Okay, there is one important problem I'd like to mention. I'm not going to dwell on there in detailed analysis. We have a serious problem here, a very specific one. The banks have to serve the citizens of Armenia properly, appropriately. And we have a situation here, provided Mr. Pashinyan is here, just for your information. Private banks close accounts for those citizens of the Republic of Armenia who were born in Iran. They check the documents, they see they were born in Iran, they tell them, come and close your dollar accounts. And that's, of course, started through these embargoes and all the prohibitions applied by US against Iran. That's what we have to converse here. This is clear violation of human rights, gross violation. These loan issues will still be solved, but we have to solve issues of human rights here. 25 times the bank deposits have increased. The loan resources have been becoming cheaper and cheaper, reaching 5% from deposits and 10% for dollar loans. This is really significant achievement. Banks, they like silence. Of course, Georgian example is attractive, but we have to make it in a way so that banks are not afraid. Being a person who has been paying fines, I'm truly insulted, because I've been paying so many amounts, and those who would not pay the fines, those who would ignore the fines and accumulate the fines, got the amnesty. You just forgave them as kind of revolutionary yields. But people who had paid their fines essentially suffered. You had to return all the money if you were doing that for the benefit of our citizens. Mr. Sargsyan, well, first of all, I should say, I should tell Mr. Vigen Sargsyan that through your terms, also the television turned into plasma TVs and LCDs. That may be your achievement as well. I mean, the growth in the banks has nothing to do with your authority, with your terms. That's about the relations between the private banks. That's where we're trying to go, which is against the business rules. I'm not even daring to make this a part of our discussion. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sargsyan. Mr. Babaksayan, you'll have 2 minutes, and then you may also respond. Mr. Tsarukyan, I've always been saying through all the meetings that most importantly that the shareholders of the banks have to enjoy the trust and credibility so that they're able to bring cheap money and provide for agriculture, help the small and medium enterprises and the youth. There are such funds, and we have also got that. I mean, our country has, for example, that gives 0%, 0.25, 0.75, like for agriculture, for young families, for small and medium enterprises. They should provide. Those who can bring more, it's better. I mean, by providing 1 million, respectively, correspondingly, they can pay 20,000 in the end of the year and get out of it. I mean, in such a short time, I'm not able to express myself. 1 minute, Mr. Bagdasaryan. Well, time's up, simply, I'm sorry, but you may come back to the point during the discussion of the next issue, if you don't mind. Apparently, I would have said that already. All right, thanks a lot. I'm glad that this is an issue of concern for all of us. It's obvious then that the banking system is well perfected in Armenia. It is obvious that it contributes. No, it is not. It is really destructive. No, it contributes to the development of our economy. But we're speaking of a different challenge and a different situation Armenia finds itself in. 1.5 million people in pawn shops, in banks, taken into captivity, really. A number of small and medium enterprises there as well. We need to demonstrate some systemic approach, implement some systemic programs and help the businesses, and also release the citizens that are now in the hands of the banks, as it happened with lifting those blacklists, which is definitely welcome. Mr. Pashinyan, the compulsory service also tried to confiscate property assets for administrative fines people had to pay and they hadn't. Mr. Sargsyan, time's up. Your question to one of the candidates. My question addressed to Mr. Pashinyan. Mr. Pashinyan, could a refused, denied power become good opposition? And could a good opposition, in result of different processes, become bad power? Well,
frankly speaking, I will be honest. I have the answer myself. The answer is no, but of late I have now become more doubtful. What are you doubting? That a bad authority could turn into good opposition? You know what? Frankly speaking, bad authorities, it's a different notion, but corrupt authorities, those who have exploited their own nation, is a completely different notion. Bad authorities is a relative term. For example, for liberals, social democrats are maybe deemed bad, and it works the other way. For social democrats, liberal democrats may be deemed bad. But in this case, in my opinion, we're talking not about bad authorities, but about authorities that completely were corrupt and have exploited their own nation, have pushed their own nation into poverty, and whether in foreign policy terms they have brought their country into a state of deprived authority. The institute of power has been undermined, and I do not think they should do the same with the opposition. Could good opposition become bad authorities? Bad authorities, I believe, boil down to the following. There will be, in Armenia, no longer they could be corrupt authorities. No longer there could be authorities in Armenia that would act against their own people, because the people already know that this issue can be resolved within a week. and those potential authorities also are aware of that. They know that the people no longer intend to bear with it. They will not tolerate corruption or permissiveness, and the method to address this issue, thanks goodness, is already mastered by the people. And there would even be no need for that. That which transpired in Armenia is of great preventive role. And I believe this preventive role shall be played for decades to come. Mr. Saxena, you'll have a possibility to respond. Let's hope that the elections and the results thereof will reaffirm what just Mr. Pashinyan mentioned. If you have nothing to add, let's launch the discussions. Yes, Mr. Marukan. The question was raised, and I would like to call a spade a spade. This was about the promise of the Republican Party becoming the opposition. I believe that the Republican Party should at least skip one electoral cycle. They're not deprived of authority altogether, and they cannot even become the opposition. They have mayors, they have village heads. Many Republicans still hold to power in the country, so it's not complete, the process of the change in power. And in these circumstances, I believe those people who are the target of many accusations, whatever they say, even they say the most fair thing in the parliament, they will be blamed of, you know, this happened during your tenure, that happened during your tenure. I believe the opposition is the future authority, and Serge Sargsyan, the head of the Republican Party, the Armenian nation doesn't see him as the next leader. About the banks, there is this contradiction between the best interest of the nation and the interest of the economic agents and those of the banks. Of course, the choice should be to the benefit of the people and the economic agents. The banks are also people. The banks should yield because it's enough. They have already robbed for many years. As for this question, as Mr. Pashinyan quite properly mentioned, it's not just the regular situation, good power, bad power. We're talking about the authorities whose domestic and foreign policies and many years of robbing the nation have resulted in genocidal consequences. We still need to understand, we were talking about the transitional justice, it should be clear as to what would be the answer that these authorities give. We're in an unordinary situation, so we need extraordinary solutions. It's very bad that this issue has come to the forefront and the nation is facing such a choice. They still enjoy the opportunity of electing the old ones. We think we should have done things in order to preclude this. But anyway, we believe the people will cast their vote and resolve this issue through it. The authorities become opposition, opposition becomes authorities, the established mature world lives through this cycle. But it only happens when there is clearly formulated ideology where both to which the authorities subscribe and another to which the opposition subscribes. Failing that, neither is any good, where it's not clear which direction the country will take. When we talk about wobbling right, left and right, they're good or bad in comparison to their ideology. The debate, the discourse takes place between political platforms, programs, ideas. We still don't have that in place. Therefore, all of this is a big convention. If the opposition and the authorities continue this way, it will be a big confusion tomorrow, day after, whether the authorities will keep their power base. We've seen alliances, how they fall apart into 3-4 segments. We've seen that happen. Why does this happen? Because there is an alliance which is not based on any ideology. The Unity Alliance was the most salient example. They broke down and pulverized. We never had a coalition. You did have a coalition. That was not coalition. What was it? No, you confuse stuff. Coalitions are post-electoral. I'm talking about the pre-electoral. Alliances go into elections. Coalitions are formed later. That's why you don't know which is which because of that confusion I just referred to. By the same token, parties also fall apart when they lack ideology. Of course that's why they live as long as a butterfly. Mr. Sargsyan, I address this question to you. You will have time to ask your question yet. This is still the discussion. There is this scenario. Your turn will come. There is one thing which is very clear. What's the funniest is that you decide that you have been good opposition. Let me remind you that since the campaign was very short, 12 days, we only showed 12 video footages about the lies starting with the speed traps, the parking lies, CSTO, gas prices. Over every issue of this you have cheated and lied to the people. So yes, this good and bad is truly a very relative. Let me finish. The rules is that you cannot use offensive language. You say lying. Lying, your entire power was based on, I called your government a lying government. About the speed traps, I said 13 billion. Please, Mr. Pashinyan, I understand that a lie is a worse offense for you than for a authority that kept the security of this country for 2 decades. What was the security? From whom the security? There were don't scare us with criminal cases. You already have done a disgraceful thing. You have turned the National Security Service into a KGB, NKVD. You've summoned people to NKVD on the eve of the elections. A big disgrace to our officers. But you should know that we add a few million. You have blamed the authorities of a conspiracy. You've been blaming the authorities for a decade. You have blamed the authorities of treason, and you have to submit facts. That which I said when I was in opposition, I said everything corroborated by facts, justified with references about the EU, about the CSTO, about the gas prices. Nothing has been refuted to this day. As for you are refuting your own statements every day in your statements in the capacity of Prime Minister, you refute everything you've been saying as the Pashinyan, the opposition. I haven't read your book yet, but there you have a quote that the death of the opposition is in the becoming the authorities. You're about the political death. That's what you're referring to. You have to use this word carefully because there's 2 days remaining to your political death. So enjoy your last couple of days. In any case, I believe that there are many people here who have under the power of, at least take terms, please. Their kids have lived in peaceful countries. They knew that they had normal relations with all countries. They knew that their economy slowly and with difficulties but was still developing. They knew that the trends were regular and normal. Everything else you have to prove over time. Your fight for the should be for the future rather than against the past. You have been a former Prime Minister, Mr. Sargsyan. I didn't reflect on it in the last round. When you believe that the interest rates in the banking sector developed on their own while you were a Prime Minister, that is a testimony to its effectiveness. If you think that the government has nothing to do with the efficiency of the banking sector, I understand why your tenure as a Prime Minister was so short-lived. It's the domain of the central bank and commercial banks. That's what I said. The time is up. Well, Mr. Sargsyan, you can respond within 1 minute, if you want, of course. Of course I do not. Well, then, thank you very much. Then we proceed. After this heated debate, finally, Madam Haroyan, please, you have your turn at a question.
Thank you. Just coming back to the previous question, just a short clarification. Mr. Sargsyan, you asked a question saying, how can a bad authority turn into good opposition? Do you consider that possible? I remember that because in one of your speeches you mentioned that the Republican Party hasn't essentially used all of its potential. Well, in that case, it should be very brief because Mr. Sargsyan may not respond in the same way or in the same time. I cannot. No, I cannot. No, you cannot answer now because it's not. It's a question addressed to all. First of all, I haven't said that the Republican Party hasn't used all of its potential. I've said that their staff, there are specialists in all political parties. There are so few. And if we want the country to develop, then we need their potential. Whether a Republican Party is in opposition or not is for the people to decide. Very brief, please, Mrs. Ariane. Very specific. I remember you mentioned the name of the Republican Party with good specialists that can be. Who are you addressing your question to? I mean, it cannot be endless, really. My question is addressed to Mr. Pashinyan. I think it's quite regular that many questions are addressed to Mr. Pashinyan. Mr. Pashinyan, we remember very well your speech of 2015 when you were saying that this constitution was essentially made for Sir Sarkisian, and one of the main issues you mentioned at the time was the change of the constitution. Well, this amendment of certain provisions thereof, as well as during the revolution from different platforms you mentioned about the requirement of amending the electoral code, but our political power didn't see that point in your program. The point that you will send a solicitation for constitutional reform. Do you plan that? Are you planning to make that change after you're elected? And if you do, then what would be the format of it? Is this going to be through general public discussions and consultations, or maybe you'll develop and send it for voting? 2 minutes, Mr. Pashinyan. Very well. Our program says that every change, any change, has to be widely discussed in public. The reform of the Constitution is not a goal, but means. We have written about that in our electoral campaign and the program. But once again, as the measure specifically, we think that certain provisions that limit the enrollment of the diaspora in public administration system have to be amended. Second, we have permanently spoken of checks and balances, of creating a mechanism, which is also so important. Yes, I have said that this administrative system is super prime ministerial, and of course all the power that's been concentrated in the hands of the prime minister has to be balanced to a certain extent with counterweights, without anyhow attempting to destroy the pyramid of power, the hierarchy, because people responsible have to be have to know very clearly what their responsibility is. We have to go through this process and make it a reality. Indeed, in order to make Armenia a real democratic country, we have to pursue this goal. But there is one thing I'd like to add. And by the way, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the word democracy was essentially associated with permissiveness. Some people think that they may blame the government of a state in handing over Artsakh and not, or taking such a credit and with no responsibility, with no liability. We were saying that we have to take responsibility for every word. That's what we have done. 1 second. We give the floor to Mrs. Ariane to respond. 1 minute. We think that the promises and the principles we have all taken to the streets in April and May have to come true. And significant changes have to be made to the Constitution, and the electoral code has to be amended, of which we haven't spoken yet. The law on political parties has to be changed. If we had done that before these elections, we wouldn't have had this false agenda as the Republican Party pursues. A Republican Party that has really destroyed the country, torn it up. To discuss whether they would become good opposition or not. I'd like to underline one more thing. We are now too focused on the Republican Party, forgetting about some other political parties, not less to blame about this. In coalition, participating in all that. We have targeted only one political party. Doubtlessly, they are worth being condemned. But the other powers that essentially are worth the same have escaped. Let's start from this side. Mr. Avedisyan, please, and brief. to the extent possible. In our understanding, we believe that a new constitution has to be adopted with unification of Artsakh in a new republic, in a new establishment. So this new constitution, I mean, you were asking a question about the format. We believe we have to adopt a new constitution through a referendum, especially when we have well-informed citizens with corresponding technology they are equipped with to fully participate with all the necessary tools to make an informed decision about adopting a new constitution. So I may repeat that after we have such solutions, we would definitely need to vote for a new parliament. Let me come back to the point. We should not be afraid of elections. The more elections we have, the stronger is the democracy of ours, especially in such an outset we are at this moment, at the dawn of a new system, because our people like to abide the law, and I'm sure that the reform will be in parallel with such a development. There are a lot of countries, Mr. Avetisan, let's respect the right to express themselves for the other participants. Yes, I'm grateful this term of super prime ministerial system was brought by us to the reality when the constitution was being reformed in 2015. But let me say that without amending the constitution, the parliament may amend the laws that would essentially avoid this super prime ministerial rule. So I think that the law can be amended as well. All the bodies beyond the oversight of the parliament have to be brought back to that oversight scope. The authorities that are not aggressive at all for the parliament, essentially, according to the new constitution, have to be clarified through a mechanism of checks and balances in order to justify its existence, augment its operation. As regards the electoral code, I think there was this article about the involvement of diaspora. I think we can amend that article simply without going for a referenda and amending the legislation through referenda. We can start doing that since January 2019. Mr. Rustaman, as brief as possible, please. I'll try. Well, when Armenia turned to parliamentarism, that was the biggest achievement. That gave us the opportunity to go through a peaceful transfer of power from one administration to the next. And naturally, we need to perfect everything all the time. Nothing's inscribed in stone, but everything has to take place in corollary of development. So if anyone thinks of changing the parliamentary system and shifting it towards super presidential, then we would be against it. All of this has to continue, and I'm so glad we have the perception that we have to amend it in a way so that we have less authority given to the prime minister, less in a way so that people do not have the impression that the prime minister essentially replaces the whole government. Every minister has to have very clear authority and responsibility, which is also the logic of the constitution. Making this change will definitely improve the parliamentary system of Armenia. Mr. Sahakian had asked for the floor. Very, very, very brief, please. Mr. Pashinyan, were those two changes you think were necessary? No, just an example I mentioned. There is the issue that the majority is established by the government through a high executive board. There is an issue. Well, there are many issues. There's the issue of legitimacy ultimately. Please be very, very precise in formulating your question. I mean, the rules of communication are now regulated by a falsified constitution. Any response to that, Mr. Pashinyan? I think that the constitution is a form that obtains substance through reality. New realities may attribute democratic substance to any constitution. And I agree with Mr. Marukyan. it is possible to apply the mechanism of checks and balances through laws. Although I'm not a big fan of that approach. Okay, we add 5 more minutes to continue the debate. I think the temptation is always so big to fit the laws to the reality. That's nothing new. Starts from medieval England, when you cut the whole forest and there are winds and you never know which tree to hide behind. There is one important thing we may note. Mr. Pashinyan just said who should be the opposition in the next parliament, and that's the Republican Party. Because from the moment, I mean, you wish for the Republicans not to be, because it's up to Mr. Pashinyan to decide everything. Isn't that true? Well, then I decide you should not. Yeah, good job. And it is with your decision that you explain to the people why the Republicans should be there. What makes, what creates discomfort for you is necessary for you. You will lose that. There is very, very clear reality. Well, that's the most comfortable opposition, the Republican Party. Provided Republicans are in opposition, there will never be change of power in Armenia. Because the Republican opposition is the guarantee for the long life of our government, for the coming 50 years at least. I mean, that's the guarantee of our long life. At least 100 years, I may even say. Well, dear voters, you may now understand that the only power making your voice heard is the Republican Party. The rest will just be saying the same thing as Mr. Pashinyan. That's the biggest effect of the revolution. The Republicans just begging people to vote for them to represent their voice. You could have done that for 20 years. For 20 years you were the ones to represent the voice of the people. You haven't. There were presidents speaking to us, Mr. Pashinyan. Those who speak to you are just press secretaries. You never leave your role of a journalist. Okay, you didn't have the right to enjoy that. You were sitting there listening the instructions from authorities, from the presidents. You were listening to instructions. You were dictated what to do. For years, Mr. Sargsyan, apparently just serving Sir Sargsyan's interests. You violate the rules of the game. I'm sorry. Okay, you will have the ability to respond to this. The opportunity. Indeed, the Constitution was definitely made comfortable for the Prime Minister, and now Nikol Pashinyan is here to enjoy it. He's saying there have to be checks and balances. Okay, I welcome that point, and apparently we have to understand the following. That the political power now makes the nation kneel before it. I'm sorry, but I mean, we have to respond somehow, you see. Mr. Bavasian, we have the time for that later. I mean, we have done everything we could. No one has the right to blame us groundlessly. Okay, keep up to the rules of the game. Let's continue.
Mr. Sargsyan, I would like to ask the following. On May 2, there was a Pan-Armenian revolt that I also took part in very consistently. The entire planet Earth came out against the regime. The airport was shut down. If it had been so good, after all, was there a revolution or not against you as a party? Was there a rebellion against you? I'm just wondering. Your question reminded me of this famous question, what were you doing during the days of the August putsch in the Soviet Union? On all of those days until the last day, from 6 in the morning, I was dealing with the issues of security of this country. I'm very proud of it. I did that honorably, and this is attested to by my colleagues with whom I served, and I think that was an honorable service for me. I was referring to the party. As for the party and what it's written up in great length. You're an academic. If you're reading those documents, You asked the question, listen to the response. For the first time ever in history, a political party has laid down its position at great length in writing. If you haven't read that, I would advise you do. Have you read it? I think it's sufficient to arrive at a conclusion. We consider that the change in power took place. Change in power takes place in various circumstances. In this case, there was a wave of discontent which Mr. Pashinyan very successfully incited. He came to power. We think that's normal, very normal. We think that this could happen regularly in any country. Mr. Pashinyan likes to say this was exceptional, nowhere else. I have to disillusion him. It happens everywhere, usually to no good outcome. Usually it ends in big problems. So let's get serious. This is a very offensive word. I would not recommend to get there because it's the time for consolidation now. I would like you to know, Mr. Pashinyan, please do not, we're talking to each other. I think it's very important for you to know that it's in nobody's interest for your power to crumble. Not even in my interest because my kids live in this country. I want you to succeed, but I want you to succeed through work, not words. Not by telling people why they're happy, but by making them feel why they're happy. Because the way you tell this is like we're living in an ideal country where pensions have increased, wages have increased, the prices went down, people don't feel it. Mr. Shirinyan will respond and then there will be a discussion. I believe that there was a revolution, and among Armenians there is, in this political class, the factor of the people is not present. There were just after all, the entire planet stood up. Was this a political revolution or not, after all? If in France, the Bourbons, after they were toppled, if the country were to go down the drain, I don't think in France it happened. Let me just share an observation. You claim that we should not use offensive words, but they tell here there was a wave of discontent and someone straddled it. This is a linguistic man said. This is the take of a person on a politician and the process. He just claims it was a wave of discontent and someone straddled it. And this politician claims that we could represent you, the people. They, both in foreign policy and in domestic policy, they only perceive this relation. Either you straddle or you are straddled. In the domestic life, they worked to attempted to straddle the people, and as a result, they were straddled out there. And now they claim they had foreign policy. Now they claim that the press secretary is talking to you. The press secretary is talking to you. No press secretary can ever talk to me at all. 4 press secretaries within the last 10 days talk to you. They can talk about me. And it's quite possible that many more press secretaries in the world will still talk about me. Please read carefully. They address it directly to you, Mr. Pashinyan. They address the statement directly to you. I just want to interpret very briefly. Several times I already reflected on this subject. It's for the first time, essentially within the last 17-20 years, there was a change in authorities as a result of revolution, and this will be enshrined through the elections. But the losing party cannot do it, bear it in a dignified way. After all, after the resignation of Serge Sargsyan, everyone else had to resign rather than clinging to their chairs, trying to do sabotage. Everyone did resign. Edmond Jan, everyone did. No, they didn't, because had they resigned, whoever didn't are traitors. They should have said, our leader resigned, so do we, rather than resisting aimlessly. You know, in the villages there is very negative, in the villages that I was in, they were very warmly receiving God. Which villages? In many villages, Mr. Maroccan, from May all the way to now. Maybe you go to only those villages where they say pleasantries to you. In every village they speak with me with great love. And I am talking about dignified defeat. Dignified defeat, when you suffer it, you will demonstrate. Now we're doing that which a political party should do. A political party should admit the reality. That the problem is that you're not admitting it. You resist to the end. You still claim. Edmond Jan, please listen. And in this reality, you have to confront the reality and embark on a new political stage. That's what we're doing. We have a mass, we have a big amount of people who tell us every day that they have our need in the parliament. Don't decide on their behalf. Don't do, I apologize, I cannot fail but to reflect on this. We have a mass, we have a number of people. This is exactly straddling the mass of people, the quantity. That says it all. This is the linguistic mindset. No, any other comment is redundant. A mass, a quantity straddling. Your linguistic mindset has been expressed in many places before. I just can't use offensive language, or I could have qualified it. I do not believe that the Republican Party should be shut down, that the Republicans should be crucified. There are people in the Republican Party who have really done a service to the country. There are people in the Republican who deserve a trial, and that's what the court should decide. Whether the Republicans will make it in these elections or not is up to the people to decide. Shutting down, ostracizing, stoning is unacceptable. Everyone is Armenian. Mr. Tsarukyan? Please, Mr. Avetisyan. No one is talking about crucifying or any other such vicious options. You're doing it, you're not talking about it. You continue to play advocate to the past regime, the regime that was shooting people. You shot people, the regime that have killed people, who tried to use the law enforcement as its truncheon. I keep the honor of an officer as opposed to you. You want to put the blame on the... apart from that, we're talking about the regime, I repeat, the activities of which has resulted in genocidal consequences, which was determined by the need to cede territories under the pretext of the war, has been the result of the death of more than 100 of our citizens and officers. And this is deserving a proper treatment. The regime, the open and concealed representatives of the regime should not try to pose this here, and you do not shouldn't try to. Mr. Avetisyan, you're violating every rule. That's no good. Mr. Marukyan, please, you have 1 minute. I know who are the murderers. In 1 minute, you can both respond and ask your own question. Very briefly, let me tell you that homicide has never been and isn't a natural right. The right to life is a natural right. My question is addressed to Gagik Tsarukyan.
Related to this newly created political system. You know, Mr. Tsarukyan mentioned that he wants no position. He just wants his people to live well, so he closed his faction essentially and he suddenly came back when the Yelk alliance, the exit alliance, was essentially gaining momentum, and now he's trying to re-establish. Since 2000s, the Tsarukyan alliance was always in the second place. Now I want to question you: are you going to segregate business from politics? What is your motivation remaining in the politics, really? Because we're going to stand for that. I'm personally ready to stand next to small, medium enterprises and take them by the hands of the whole process. Why do you need to go to the parliament at all? I will answer your question with pleasure. I have no need to protect. You protect your allies. Mr. Tsarukyan has started in the politics not like other political powers to get some position or to be well known or to enjoy respect. Mr. Tsarukyan remembers where he started and what he wants. It's not just malfluence. Anything I have done, anything, any approach, any action, essentially is proven, and I can show the documents. Yes, I have everything. I have reached myself by just working from a common workers' family, and Kotaik knows, and Arinj knows, and everyone knows where I started. One flower is not spring yet. If you are able to be useful to your nation, to your country, to the people, if you are able to provide and love your people, I mean, I'm not just investing money in the country. people really admire what they see here when they come from other countries. There's progress, and I'm ready to use it, and I'm ready for that, and I do it with everything that I do. When Mr. Tsarukyan goes to Belgium, one meeting that he has there brings 80 European parliamentarians to Armenia, and there was a helicopter, then 20 more would come. So we're just trying to show, how people live in Karabakh, what they want, what I tell them. We don't mean to really criticize Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan can do the same about us. I'm inviting people so that they come around and they can see. And today I just want to say, Mr. Marukan, that's not what nourishes me. I want to be useful. Mr. Marukan Jan, I do everything in order to have my country develop, a strong country and well-being. I could have invested my money in Russia, but everything that, for example, if I open a trade house, a trade center, I could get $5 million from there a month. Okay, let them respond and then we'll continue. First of all, it's the people that help me, telling me that to me. Yes, you're telling me who your guidance is. You know me, yes, I know you. Okay, I just answered your question. Okay, I have to respond. I can respond. I didn't interrupt you, Mr. Tsarukyan. I'm sorry. I'm listening. Okay. The question is about the following. When you do something good, you could do that without a mandate. This is the 7th convocation parliament. We're going to participate in the sessions, work in the standing committees, and have speeches. We had 37 mandates in 2012, 31 in 2017, and the life of the people hasn't changed. As regards to investments, yes, you have in Bulgaria, in Belarus, yes, I do. Okay, you could have invested the same, in Armenia, and create the workplaces. But the money comes from Armenia already, yes. Got the monopoly from Sir Sarkisian. Shangri-La Casino got the monopoly. All the small casinos were closed, and there was one big casino remaining. That's yours. Well, you see, let me also fight back this, because it was announced for everyone. Those who could come and invest 100 million in Armenia, they could get that monopoly. Okay, you did, and you got the monopoly. Okay, can you hear? Is there a casino in Tsakhtadzor? Well, that's just next to Yerevan. That's 20 kilometers, yes. But Shangri-La today yields $1 million a month. The one in Tsakhtadzor yields 20,000. What value does it create? What value? What do you mean value? Like, what does it produce? What additional value does it create for our people? What does it import? Well, there is a hotel and there are restaurants. I didn't say anything about the hotel. Yes, but the hotel, they invested 150 million in the hotel, which exists today, for example. These are British investors, and they just wanted to invest in Armenia, and, which is, for example, like they manage it, and Mr. Tsarukyan, wouldn't allow himself and to make any decision even. I'm glad people invested in Armenia, and this is the most hotel in Armenia, and the Pharaoh Hotel. They come and they're high-ranking people, and we're not shy, and they come and stay there, and they use the conference. I just want to know about your motivation, Mr. Tsarukyan. This is a political promotion, in fact. We have to change. Well, Mr. Tsarukyan has succeeded on his own, specifically understanding very well where and how it should be used. But by now, apart from talking, you haven't done anything, Mr. Marukan. What have you done? Just apart from talking, what have you done, my dear, apart from talking? I'm not a businessman. I think a politician should not do business, and businessmen should not do politics. Yes, I think it's a new political system that cannot tolerate that approach anymore. Okay, when you were elected an MP, who supported you? People supported me. Go to Vanadzor and ask, do you know Gevorg? You didn't come to me. I was suggested, I got the offer to come to you, and I didn't agree. Yes. There are many people. Okay, I mean, really demagogy doesn't help here. All right. So anyone else to participate in this discussion? Mrs. Ariane, please. I'm sorry, but my question is not addressed to Mr. Tsarukyan, but to Mr. Marukyan, if the format allows. I mean, you're not asking a question. You're just expressing your opinion. You may express your opinion here. Well, then my opinion. One very interesting point mentioned by Mr. Marukyan, that is a classical parliamentarian. What do we understand behind it? You are part of different alliances, factions all the time, same frequency, living some of those. How can we explain that, Mr. Marukyan? This strictness of yours, asceticism maybe, or maybe some other reasons. Well, let me explain. The first faction I established, I created, I was one of the co-founders. It was Exit, it was Yelk. We united against the regime, the system, that was the Republican regime with its coalitions, and it was quite a successful faction. The regime is destroyed, no need for any further unification. We went to the streets, yes, good job. I didn't go to the streets, that's why I'm neither a deputy prime minister nor I'm a minister. I continue doing my job. You have to let Mr. Marukyan respond. Okay, well, you were, I never persuaded anyone. Your political party sponsored, spends money in order to blacken us, really. Who knows you? I'm sorry, who knows you? What have you done? Who are you? What have you done? Just blocked the road? What do you want to say? You spend money to criticize others, that's it. How many LSG elections did you participate? Well, yes, but what do you have to do here at all? I mean, how many times did you participate? I'm asking you, did you participate in local self-government elections? I'm just asking you. There were no elections, that's why they didn't participate. If you haven't participated in elections, then what weight do your words have? Like, I mean, you decide who should be represented in the parliament. You were deciding that previously. Okay, you think Nikol Pashinyan and Edmond Marukyan appeared in the parliament with the decision of Sir Sarkisian? Well, we're done. Mr. Pashinyan, you can ask the question now. Choose the addressee. You have already responded.
My question is addressed to the representative of the Citizens Decision Party, Mr. Saikian. Mr. Saikian, I remember that there was a time when you were actively talking and discussing and setting forth the notion of decapitalization. I'm just wondering, in your campaign now, have you succeeded to present this idea to the citizens? And I'm wondering, how did it go down with them? What's your take on this? And perhaps this is an opportunity to once again to reflect on this notion, because I'm really wondering to what extent does this idea get perceived by the public at large, in your impression? To what extent is the Armenian public ready to pursue that path? Thank you. 2 minutes. Let me tell you that in the wake of the election, after the revolutionary processes, we commenced we embarked on this as a citizens' initiative. We discussed this with the Ministry of Justice to adjust and tweak some provisions, and there was a suggestion made to include this suggestion in the overall concept of the transitional justice. Could you please spell it out for us so that we know what it's about? We're talking about the following. A tremendous amount of unlawful capital has been accumulated in the country, and we're talking about the following. If so far the owners of these assets have been seeking protection through the status of members of the parliament or being in public office, maybe the public could excuse them these assets against the prohibition to engage in politics, that which Mr. Marukan and Sarukan were referring to. That's what I was proposing. I think it's a pretty difficult process. Why did we ascribe importance to it? In order for there not to be a redistribution of property so that we do not fall into a permanent cycle of revolutions. And apparently it turned out to be a much more difficult concept than we initially imagined. I can see that many people just fail to understand or accept this need for forgiveness. They think that you need to disenfranchise everyone, seize the assets, but if this mindset doesn't change, it will lead to permanent revolution cycle. You have 1 minute to respond, Mr. Pashinyan. In general terms, let me tell you that, yes, I fully share your observation about the fact that our public are, they come up with much more stringent demands. They insist on more stiff requirements. And having campaigned in more than 40 settlements in the country, mostly in cities and towns, I registered that the most frequent accusation against us is that this cabinet is not strict enough, has not been strict enough against the representatives of the previous authorities, all the way through blaming us. The people blame us that, and they name people of why are these people still at large, they claim. On the other hand, you can see that they also blame us in overdoing it, on the other hand, which is not the case in reality. We ascribe great importance to subsequent fight against corruption, and we think it's very important for this to happen within 4 corners of the law. 5 minutes for a debate. Please be as brief for everyone. Half a minute to respond. Mr. Pashinyan, although maybe we just failed to properly present it to the nation, our approaches, that is, but I can see that there are responses from various sources, especially those against whom this notion should have applied. The first bell rang, if I'm not mistaken, when there were these 2 MPs on behalf of Grant County who laid down their mandates. They said there is no need to be involved in the National Assembly in order to protect one's assets. This was followed by, I shall not list, there were many cases when people have proposed to return the stolen assets against forgiveness. The most recent example was Alexander Sargsyan's 30 million that he suggested to return. There was one more person who proposed to do this, provided they, I'm referring to their willingness, provided they were pardoned. Armen Avetisian have submitted an application to the State Asset Property Management Office proposing to donate the Golden Palace Hotel to the state. Frankly speaking, we have more such applications. When we met with the Zarukan faction, we arrived at a consensus around a formula. Compensation against pardon on the condition of prohibition to engage in politics. I can't recall the 4th component exactly, but we have this consensual agreement. This idea of disenfranchisement is not a very democratic one. I believe that for economic crimes we have to draw the line. We have to tell the people, return whatever you stole to the national budget as a result of a particular process, a visible, a transparent one, and you also should know what happens to those assets and funds. People should see that there was robbery, there was shantytown, no robbery, no shantytown. So I believe when a businessman and entrepreneur enters the parliament, other entrepreneurs feel vulnerable. Let us also enter the parliament. He is more protected than us. So this problem is there. I think the future political system could be healthy only if business and politics are separate. I'm talking big business. Yes, the state, the government, the future parliament should protect big business, small business, everyone. This model has been used in Great Britain under Margaret Thatcher. The law was named the Wind Law. The privatization that was done for pennies or below market or accompanied by corrupt acts, there was a formula. According to this formula, the damage incurred was estimated, the people paid up, and they signed an agreement with the public promising never again. They should not donate. They're not donating, they're just returning what they stole and they atone for it. Very briefly, yes, I support the points referred to. They should be returned by power of law. As for the economy, I support the Marocain's opinion. Through persistent decriminalization of economic crime. But of course, full compensation, offsetting the damages incurred. I fully agree with Mr. Sargsyan's, Mr. Pashinyan's position that this process should be made irreversible. They're not donating. They just stole, they robbed, and by power of law, they just return. Yes, this should be returned by power of law, but there should also be liability. Not to transgress every boundary, we should draw the red and yellow line. Anyone over the red line who were in decision-making office and entered into criminal collusion, there are a few of those, they should be held penally liable and fully disenfranchised. Anything between the red and yellow lines, and there are dozens of these conventionally speaking, they should go through the mechanism just proposed, but people who have association with the red and yellow lines should be deprived for life of the right to hold public office. Yes, this should be done by law and transparent mechanisms. Failing that, there will be great jeopardies. The first great danger may be in that these so-called returned or to be returned funds or assets will be brought back through international tribunals, and the voters have to understand the simple thing. It's very fun, of course, before the elections to smash against the wall or roll out over asphalt some known people. You should know that if you do it on your own level, the beat of police officers will ask for a garage to be given to him for protection, and they will do it. A car, a garage, or some assets will be lit. And your aides won't update you about that like they don't do about many other things. You have to be very careful. No one has succeeded in fighting corruption by decapitating. There are countries where do it by a firing squad, but the corruption still stays. We have not cut any hands or arms, nor are we intending to. We do not cut any heads off, neither we intend. No firing squad, no intention of a firing squad. As for rolling out on asphalt or smashing against the walls or infringements, as it is known today, they infringe and roll out on asphalt exclusively in a procedure stipulated by law, and that's already known. Let me tell you two things. Under our law already, those crimes that pertain to tax evasion, the law already provides for this. If you cover what you owe by taxes to the state, the case is abated, and in the procedure stipulated by law, the assets are also returned. 40 titles of Manuel Grigorian in the procedure stipulated by law through the motion of the Special Investigative Service. The local administrations will submit lawsuits to the court contesting the tenders that have taken place, because it has been proven, in fact, that there had been no real tender. There will be more. Please, we do not have enough time. Finally, we have arrived at the final trio of our guests. Mr. Rustamian, your turn to ask question. Choose whoever you ask it to.
Well, the issue of Artsakh is so important for us, even though we discussed it already. But I think closer to the end, I may wrap this up and conclude partially, because I heard what Mr. Marocain was saying regarding the 175th article and consistent implementation of the requirement thereof. which is also so important because we follow the same logic. Oh, your question, please. Oh, yes, my question. Of course, it is addressed to Mr. Pashinyan, because we've had that conversation already, yet in the beginning, to reinstate whether Mr. Pashinyan is going to be guided already in his prime ministerial term by Article 175 in the Constitution of the people of Artsakh. Thank you, Mr. Rustaman, for now remembering that conversation. I'd like to remember now what I have told you during that conversation. I told you that our political party had expressed itself yet in 2012. This was a public statement made by our political party, you may still find on the web, with the reference to the article of the Constitution you just mentioned. Moreover, as a government, we further augmented that approach of ours. Why and how? Because we quite clearly dwell upon the participation of Artsakh in the process of negotiations. I want to say that the issue of participation of Artsakh is getting the necessary resonance in the international community slowly. And it was quite strange to hear doubts and skepticism on the part of your political party regarding that statement, because that statement was officially made essentially through official negotiations. And yes, indeed, I reinstate right here, we're still up to that, and I can also state that the issue of Artsakh cannot be regulated without Artsakh itself, without the agreement of the people of Artsakh. And I think that this topic generally, I'm hoping at least after such a statement of mine, that will never be speculated again. Yeah, that conversation was further updated, because after that you announced that you would go and ask the people whether they would agree, and then you would solve the issue, you would solve the problem. I'm telling you that people of Artsakh have already said how it should be solved. I mean, if you are guided by that logic, then you should not say that you will go and ask them. People have said already what they want. You have to implement that. 5 minutes of a debate because your answer enjoys some time. Well, the problem is the following. There is a process of negotiations. One of the primary issues for us is to bring the negotiation process to the point in which the government and the people of Artsakh have full participation in it. As regards the resolution of Artsakh conflict in general, then we say that it is necessary to solve it internationally through recognition of Artsakh as an independent republic. If we all say now that there is no need to have the will of the people of Artsakh internationally recognized, then there is no need for negotiations either. We don't need the international community to recognize the status of the people of Artsakh at all. And we would cease negotiating from that moment on. That's the biggest problem. And essentially, consensus in the Armenian reality about the fact that we hold the negotiations for two main purposes. First, that's the determination to be recognized by the international community, the determination of the people of Artsakh, self-determination, respectively, with guarantees for security for the people thereof. One short response. Mr. Pashinyan, the discussion was very clear. Article 175 says the following: status quo will persist till the moment the territorial integrity of Artsakh is restored, of which I spoke in the beginning, and independence recognized respectively. Meaning, the logic behind our negotiations should always be guiding us towards this goal. Those who come to power have to express the will of the people. That's what I meant exactly, and that's what I meant as well. But this is what the negotiations should be focused at. Yes, but what is the negotiations about at all, in general? Because we say that that's where the solution rests, and we are offered different options. If there is recognition, we just say congratulations. There is no continuation after that. We say, well, that's what I'm asking. What do you say? The statements that you've made after do not correspond to what you said before. You say, I will speak on behalf of the people when they come up with suggestions. No, I'm saying the point. What's the purpose of negotiations at all? And the purpose of negotiations is to have the international recognition of Artsakh self-determination right. That's the point. Yes, exactly. The will of the people of Artsakh. Exactly. Recognition of the will of the people may take place in presence of a number of additional requirements. I've said that if something is suggested that I may consider acceptable, then I will bring that up. Well, you don't have to accept anything else than what the people of Artsakh want. Very well. Then let the people of Artsakh choose the representatives thereof and sit at the table of negotiations. Yeah, the people of Artsakh have to participate. The issue rests in a different place. What's the purpose of negotiations? We negotiate for which purpose? Because the ARF would never just dwell on any concerns are not grounded. What are you going to do? A referendum. Very, very, very dangerous, because respectively Azerbaijan may also hold a referendum that may undermine the self-determination right of people of Artsakh. You know why I asked this question? You know, recently there are just sonorous words and terms used everywhere around, that this thing and that thing, and this would come and go there. I mean, if you do the referendum, they will do the referendum as well, which is not in our interests, definitely. Okay, this is what's in our interest. It's necessary to have the people of Artsakh determine itself, not for Azerbaijan to decide on that. If you do a referendum here, they will do a referendum there as well. Who said that? Who said that? I say that. If you appoint a referendum here, Aliyev is going to hold a referendum in Azerbaijan. We say that any solution has to be acceptable by the people. Mr. Pashinyan, really get a good team to do that. Mr. Sargsyan, that's serious or a good team you're saying. It's an issue of security of the country, really. Because that populism kills countries. People will decide. How will the people decide? What are you talking about? Okay, people will decide that you have to leave the country, I'm sure. Will you leave it? I mean, this issue has already been discussed. I would like to repeat. You see, concerns, yes, they exist. You may be concerned with different issues. However, recently, there is a very specific blackening taking place in the country, saying you are traitors, but now they are deceiving us because they are undermining our values, sacred values, saying Artsakh is now being handed over, they're giving back the lands, etc. This is definitely propaganda, and that propaganda is going to have its role to play, I'm sure. No one's going to hand Artsakh over. No parliament, no prime minister, no president in Armenia would ever take that path, and has never taken. Well, don't tell us there have been such. No, they have tried to, at least, but they haven't succeeded. Well, maybe they have, but it may blossom, may sprout again. I don't think so. All right, if they don't try to, yes, maybe they won't ever try to because of the people, because people will be always against that. When the people is strong enough. Those who did that had 83% of the people's votes in '90s, in the beginning of '90s. Yes, that's why they went there. They took that path. Yes, they took that path to compensate the inner security by external issues, external problems. Maybe that was an attempt to do that when there was no support inside. That's when they decided to do so. When they enjoy the assistance from inside, then they won't need to create anything outside. Mr. Rustaman, yes, that's how it started, indeed. That's where the process started. I'm afraid it may start again. It was right after the falsified elections of 1994. Okay, Mr. Rustaman, Let's give the floor to Mr. Avetesyan and Balasaran. Thank you. I think the most important thing we should always remember is the mandate given by the people. The problem of Nagorno-Karabakh, which is one of the compository parts of the Armenian issue, essentially there's no other model. Why are we going for negotiations at all? We should never be afraid of negotiating, neither we should be afraid when negotiating. But there has to be negotiation, and we have to own it. We have to decide. Armenian people has to decide. Constitutions will change and laws will change, but the values that will stay is the collective will of the people. Thank you, Mr. Balasaran. And the most important thing is, of course, security, status, and we really have to do everything for our people to have an acceptable solution. Thank you, Mr. Balasaran. It's clear. We can understand what you're saying. Thank you. Well, let's make some clarifications here. I'm sorry, with all due respect. However, I don't see consensus on that point. And, I may suppose the reason is the following. First of all, there are opinions in sundry. We bear as well. The Armenian nation is one integrity. There's no people of Artsakh, nation of Artsakhtsis. There is one Armenian nation, and one Armenian nation is going to make the decision. Demarcations will ruin everything. If we start putting borders, we can put one right close to Zangezur, for example. So I repeat, the issue of Artsakh should be solved not by recognizing independence of Artsakh, which definitely brings destruction, but such a decision may be a possibility of returning Artsakh to Azerbaijan. Okay, we got your point, Mr. Avetesyan. That's a separate point. That's a weighty one as well. Thank you. Yes, we understand the issue of Artsakh is the most important issue. Everyone understands that, for all Armenians at least. But we have to make a decision ultimately. We have to proceed. So we continue. Your question, Mr. Sarkyan. Who do you address it to in 1 minute?
I would like to first acknowledge that we have 10 days for a substantive debate. Instead, we witnessed the poisoned crossfire of two forces like we do now. And this shuts down the real debate about the future of Armenia. I committed to find the path that will then form the public demand, and it would not hereafter in the future be so easy for you to revert to the tactics of black and white and shutting the substantive debate. So what's your question? This format does not offset this gap. Nevertheless, since I have this opportunity to ask a question, I address it to Mr. Marukyan and would like to ask the following. 2 days ago, Mr. Marukyan, you identified the third path. Was it good? Any good? And how do you evaluate the leader of the political power party not being able to predict the revolution 2 days in advance? Thank you. Very good opportunity to clarify one more time, because over these days there's a clear anti-propaganda against us, and one part of that is my interview during the revolution. The third path implied no victims, no bloodshed, no second March 1 in resolving an issue, which is what exactly happened. Moreover, I'll tell you, I'm the person who in the parliament have told Sir Sarkisyan that if anyone's nose bleeds under this constitution, you will be directly responsible, since the chief of the police from that day on was reporting directly to the prime minister. They tell us a lot. You didn't go out in the streets back then. We had our own approaches, and we pursued our own approach all the way through. We had a principle about certain tactics, but we told our colleagues, please go out, and we'll help you whatever way we can. People rejected Sir Sarkisyan in the street. We rejected Sir Sarkisyan within the building of the parliament. Many people who weren't involved in anything those days, neither in the buildings, neither out on the streets, nor in the words, nor in the deeds, are all now out wearing revolution baseball caps. Our path is, the third path is without bloodshed, without victims. When I traveled to Strasbourg, I was in Moscow on my way. Already then, the negotiations between Sargsyan and Pashinyan failed. I entered live on the air and called upon them to resume the dialogue. I had the feeling that there was going to be force used. I wanted to prevent it. I had this feeling that there were tanks about to roll out into the streets. Thankfully, this didn't happen, and we have our contribution to that through what we did, through our policy. We did not expect to wear laurels in the wake of the revolution, which many people attempt now to do. We claim that our one. We defend revolution values, but we're not revolutionary, and we'll be the second in the future parliament. I already told that I do not take this format seriously, and this is not leading to a substantive debate. I asked the question because there was an opportunity to ask a question. Maybe that's not very polite or respectful towards your colleagues. Well, I'm thankful to Mr. Sahakian. This was a good opportunity to once again elucidate our position. You're quite right. Everyone wants to wear those laurels, but I haven't noticed anything like that in the street. Had you also been out there in the streets, you would have felt that it wasn't possible to stop that with tanks. Had it been possible, if they were going to roll out, they would have. Had you been involved in the political processes, you would have understood. You know, I believe that the only reason why tanks didn't roll out in the street, the only reason why they didn't, was that the Republican Party was very persistent about those demonstrations and rallies, not to use any force against them. I think the political will that the entire world acknowledged in those days cannot just be ignored with a condescending smile just months later. You can say that. As for the black and white, I would like to once again respond to you and our voters. The black and white was not our choice. We reject the idea of dividing into black and white altogether. We believe that only fascists can divide the society into black and white. The black and white society always invariably leads to confrontation. We just bounced it back to you, Mr. Pashinyan, because that was your and your mayor's proposed false agenda. We weren't there. We didn't take part in those elections, opening up the space for you to break the barriers and barricades in the mayor's elections. You decided otherwise, and you got what you wanted. But in these elections, we'll have more opportunities. You don't break barricades by words. You have to learn to throw bridges, which is a longer lasting and more difficult job. As for the format, I think you were not fair by not accepting my invitation to a one-on-one debate, because your entire campaign was built on throwing mud at the Republican. I said any time and place of your choice to have a debate. We still have 2 days, I believe. Even if you have a visit tomorrow, or even if the day after it's the 7th, I can find the format. I think the public expects things to hear from us. We took up everybody's time today because still, after all, the main debate is between the two of us. Let me respond. I apologize. Listen, if I'm here today expressing my respect towards all political parties and the representatives thereof, I want to emphasize that this is an exceptional eventuality. the Prime Minister ad interim or the head of the government. It is unprecedented that it takes place in the debate now. If I accept an invitation by an individual political party, this would be disrespectful to others because they also have the right to debate with the... That's why they're all here. But since you have individual topics to... You know what? During my campaign, I've touched upon hundreds of subjects. No, half a time you hit at the ARF, half a time you hit at the Sasnatara. As for the last question requiring commentary, why the tanks didn't roll out into the street? For a simple reason, because the people manning those tanks were 100% guaranteed to join the demonstrators. That was common knowledge. That was the real reason why that order was not issued. Let's not forget, you forget that under the change legislation, tanks under the law that we amended, the tanks could not have in principle rolled out into the street. You know that. We have seen how you protect the laws. We protect the laws. We've heard that in the wiretaps of your conversation. Even today, we listened how you issue instructions to the law enforcement. I apologize about these phone calls. Take turns, please. During these phone conversations, every idea I expressed during that phone call are 100% in compliance with the law. As for the other two officials and what they said and what they did, they are also in 100% compliant with the law, and that could be acknowledged by every person who is aware of the functions that the national security have. So when the national security knows what the court is going to rule out, that's 100% in compliance with the law. Those are the judges you appointed. They say he's going to issue what the ruling we want. They know in advance what the ruling would be. This is a specific question. I'm talking about the representatives. The representatives of your authorities are blamed of breaking the constitution. It's not pleasant. You have looked in the eyes of the people many times and told them no judge is going to receive instructions by you, and you violated that in public, saying that who's going to be the judge not to listen to my instruction. Then in the square you said what you really expect from the judges. If you had to call someone individually, you just made it Urbi and Orbi. You tried to intimidate all judges. You have attempted to intimidate all journalists, telling them that the newspapers are printing anti-governmental stuff. You have been editor-in-chief for many years. You don't respect even your former colleagues. Mr. Sarksel, let's listen to the response. I am telling this with all responsibility. Today, the media is free more than ever before. The internet is freer than ever in Armenia. The investigative bodies in Armenia read the report by ODIHR. The ODIHR report is about the lexicon of hatred. Mr. Sargsyan, let Mr. Pashinyan finish. Have you seen the type of offensive language in the media? Have you seen what kind of language have been introduced to you in the Armenian segment of the internet? Young girls are writing obscenities on the internet and are happy. They think it's normal. That's not young girls. It's the fakes that you have set up. It's not our fakes. You set up the fakes in this country. You are running those fakes. You have spent funding from the public funds to set up those fakes to form opinion. You've been spending public funding for that. Mr. Pashinyan, that's what I was telling you when you asked the question. Mr. Sargsyan, you have the right to respond. I have to say that Mr. Vigen Sargsyan mentioned that the debate is between both of you and it's ideological. I have to respectfully disagree. As a painter, I can tell you that when you mix black and white, you get something gray as a result, which is no good. And secondly, your debate is not ideological. You're debating who's closer to Putin, whose justice is fairer. Well, justice is ideology. Relations with Russia, knowing or not knowing how to build relations with Russia is also ideology. We're the only ones who are subscribing to ideology, who insist that there is an other. Anyone who has anti-Russian sentiments are free to express that. I do not have anti-Russian sentiments. The debate is over. The debate is over. As opposed to your supporter, Mr. Sargsyan, it's the time for you to ask the question. Please take. We have exceeded the 3-hour allocation. We've been on air for more than 3 hours. It's a pleasure for me. So what's your question, Mr. Sargsyan? You have the right to ask the last question. My question is addressed to you, however strange it may seem. That's a surprise. I want to ask you the following. Over these months, there are many things that happen that are of concern in terms of national values. This question is addressed to Mr. Pashinyan. We had a situation when the work of the Catholicos Aid by certain hooligans was disrupted by some hooligans for weeks. The caravan of the Catholicos was blocked in the street for many times. The policeman didn't offend. We have a situation when the history of Armenian Church became the unwanted discipline in the schools. The party foundations that found you includes 2 activists from the LGBT communities. Do you have any, do you owe anything to those activists or not? And finally the question, do national values matter, or does the liberal ideology outweigh that?
Well, let's start from the point that national values in Armenia have always been important and will always be important. Let's start from the fact you insist that the history of religion was the most disturbing. What are you talking about? Where? I mean, something is really getting destructive. What is getting destructive? It's been taken off the school curricula. What are you saying? One second. Do not interrupt. Let me respond. It's the same as if you are stating, like you have discovered that. You're saying the government, according to you, okay, not using your words, going to promote outreach, but that's not what we have said. That's what your minister has said. You now really invented that. Something promoting to outreach, promoting the fact that people want to find work in foreign countries. This is lies. As regards the members of the Board of Trustees, the members of the Board of Trustees are citizens of the Republic of Armenia. Those people that you and your allies say are activists is a mother of 4 children, is an Armenian traditional family representative, and I want to say that in your times, when you were the authority, there was a list first time of people who had other sexual orientation, of high officials who were on that list, and you are a part of that power, you are a part of that authority. And the number of well-known members of your government are known as LGBT community representatives. You made just now a sexist expression. LGBT community has all the rights, as all the others do. You cannot judge. You should not judge because of sexual orientation. Yes, you are now segregating, dividing people into categories. I'm telling you something different. I'm saying those women, I don't know them. Maybe they're good mothers, good family, full of respect. They are activists. That's what their posts say. They are the flagmen of that struggle. I mean, I'm really, that's it. It's really done. Oh, no, you're really interrupting. I'm asking you a simple question. It's a different question. You're answering differently. I'm just answering. Is there any liability before the LGBT community? That's it. Do you have it or you don't? You told me everything possible. People have the right to choose. They can do anything in intimacy. I am against sexual parades in general, independent from for homosexuals or heterosexuals. I think a child walking in the street should not see that. An Armenian child should not see that. We are really now... no, do I have the right to respond? You see... Okay, let's see. I'm sorry. There's the syllogism. Vigen Sargsyan just said that LGBT community representatives have the same rights and responsibilities, the same rights as all the other citizens of the Republic of Armenia. You heard that. Now, people I just mentioned, as he said, women, say the same thing. They say, don't interrupt me. It's the face of debates, I can interrupt. You're saying that the representatives of LGBT community, those two women, say the same thing as Vigen Sargsyan just said in live. Vigen Sargsyan named those women LGBT activists, respectively, for what he said right now. Respectively, Vigen Sargsyan is an LGBT activist. This is a very, very simple logical chain. Do you have an aquarium at home, Mr. Pashinyan? There is this story about an aquarium. Do you have an aquarium at home? And I mean, I have the liability. I'm responsible before the citizens of the Republic of Armenia. That's what I'm responsible for. I want to clearly state here. I mean, there are equal rights we have to protect. Let's have some respect towards each other. Okay, I am responsible before the citizens of the Republic of Armenia, and I say the following. Apart from all those responsibilities that I have officially taken publicly, I have no other responsibilities. I'm not responsible for anything else. I mean, not liable before anyone, any statement. I mean, I'm really interested now with your statement about activism. As regards values, traditions, I think that no political power has spoken of values so many times as My Step Alliance. Secondly, I do not want some separate corrupt public officials and subservience to be associated with national values. This is a very important thing. So if we speak of the Armenian Apostolic Church, I have said that Armenian Apostolic Church has been highly devaluated in the years of Republican Party, because Armenian Apostolic Church has always been an attaché of your government. The Republican did that. Our authorities, we have the following very clearly mentioned. Our priority, the main priority for us, is the protection of national identity, sovereignty, and independence. Let's give the floor to the woman now. Thank you. Dear friends, you may now clearly see what ideological struggle we're at, set on by the Republicans. They have agreed that the rules are now divided between those for the blacks and those for the whites. We have shown the threat. Will you let me finish? No, you're not hearing what I'm saying, and you are now interpreting. I just want to break this thread now, because when the floor was given to the Republican representative to ask the ideological question, see what ideological question he said. He mentioned national values were linked to that community, so it turns out that we do not have any other problem in Armenia. So this power, this authority that has brought the country to economic crisis, desolated and devastated and deprived families of their houses and shelters, and over 30% of the people now being poor, is standing here struggling ideologically for the LGBT community. Dear Mr. Sargsyan, I want to assure you, I just want to assure you, you are really threatening national values by saying that. Respect the woman. Because believe me, the idea of family is very strong in the Armenian reality. And this is just manipulations. We have nothing else to say. We're done. This is the hardest part of the debates now, and now we have to thank, first of all of you. You may give yourselves hand. You have successfully completed this very difficult phase. this very difficult round of debates, and respectively we are left up to the fourth round. And in the fourth round, you each have 1 minute to conclude and also address your electorates.
I would like to tell my colleagues we all should know that we're all here today. People are waiting for change in their lives in the wake of the parliamentary elections. Real change, not just words that don't transform into deeds. But we need to offer them something that they're waiting for. We all should know that there comes December 10. After December 9, we should be polite to each other, we should respect each other. I've heard during the campaign many politicians in their statements claim we say what we deem important, the others say what they do. We need to listen to it. We will pick and choose from it whichever is good for the country, for economic development strengthening, for the prosperity of the nation. We should discuss it in a constructive note without offending each other. Whoever turns out to be true, if we want to change things in real life, we must do it together, build the country together. Thank you. It will be very nice. It's already 1 a.m. We have 10 minutes to finish. So let's, like Mr. Zarukyan did, conclude this on a positive cue. Dear compatriots, within the last 100 years, luck has smiled on us 3 times. First time it was just 100 years ago, after the military miracle in the Battle of Sardarabad. We had an opportunity to build independent and strong state, nation state, but we failed to do that because we didn't have real choice back then, or no real alternative back then. 70 years down the road, during the national liberation struggle of Artsakh, early 90s, the second door opened up, the second opportunity. We had the opportunity to choose then, but there was no alternative. 100 years down the road, today, this year, we have seen the civil Sardarabad miracle with our own eyes, and thanks goodness now we both have a choice and an alternative. The alternative is the Sasnaterer Pan-Armenian Party, which is the radical national power force that would really become the second pole. Please vote for number 10, Sasnaterer Pan-Armenian Party. Mr. Bagdasaryan, dear compatriots, I also welcome everyone. I believe this was content-wise a very constructive discussion. Everyone laid down their positions. I am for free and fair elections for our citizens to cast their votes to those who they believe in. Everyone has work done behind their back. The nation should see and appreciate that the rule of law proposes socio-economic development vision for Armenia. It lays down its take on all aspects of national state. We propose social, ideological provisions that would result in radical qualitative change in the life of this country, and we are anchored on our national values as a political organization. We are for bold, innovative, tested, literate people in Armenia who will contribute to decisive change which the nation awaits. Mr. Sargsyan, you're closing 1 minute. I apologize to begin with. Before all those who I may have offended, I didn't really intend it. I would like to ask our nation to cast their vote for the US alliance. We are reliable, we are to be trusted, we're not populist, we've never been populist, neither over the issue of Karabakh nor over the issue of economy or the banking system. We take very carefully, and we will be taking very carefully, our nation and our statehood. Cast your vote for us, you will not be disillusioned. Thank you, Mr. Sargsyan. You saved more seconds again. Brilliant, Madam Haroyan, please. Dear nation, the April-May national revival demonstrated that we are a potent nation and we deserve the best. But that was just the first step. We still have a lot more left to do. There's a long way ahead of us that we need to traverse together. We just now have to disassemble the criminal pyramid and create the Armenia of our dreams. Who should do that? Is it those who have already brought the country to this crisis and have depopulated it? Is it those who are ready and willing, for the sake of several ministerial portfolios, to enter into coalition with just about anyone? Of course not. The new powers, the healthy forces have to do that. So you have to choose these. You have to choose our victory. You have to elect New Armenia. And please vote for number 7, the National Progress Party. Thank you, Madam Harayan. Mr. Shirinyan, it's your 1 minute now. I'm certain that we will go towards the day of the elections, and after elections the Christian system of values will be put back in place, culture will be restored, the academic industrial system will be kicked into action, and on the basis of the strong industry we will embark on the path of creating powerful Armenia. I'm certain that our constituency will follow us. I wish everyone success. Thank you, Mr. Shirinyan. Mr. Marokyan, please, your 1 minute. Thank you, dear compatriots. It's obvious for all of us that these contacts have reaffirmed the meetings in our communities. The televised meetings have come to prove that the old system has been disassembled, although there are some attempts to get back to certain rudiments of the old system, to put them back in place. Rest assured that on December 1, the period of building a new system will launch. The Bright Armenia is a system building force. We will invest our knowledge, our potential, our capacity in building the Armenian national statehood. We've been doing that in the past. We came up against walls, whereas today there's this opportunity in every village, every city. We claim that Bright Armenia, we believe, should be the second political presence. You have now that opportunity through casting your vote to bring Bright Armenia with its professional team to vote for number 5 in the ballot. Thank you very much, Mr. Marokyan. Mr. Parokyan, your 1 minute. Dear compatriots, proud citizens of the Republic of Armenia, the die is cast, and the specifics of today's political situation is that the power in Armenia is 100% belonging to you, citizens of the Republic of Armenia. And every citizen of the Republic of Armenia on December 9, with his or her 1 vote, shall determine the composition of the authorities, the government, and will do this exclusively in a free and fair expression of their own will. No vote shall be rigged. There will be no vote buying, and those who would attempt that will be strictly punished. Therefore, on December 9, as a free and proud citizen of the Republic of Armenia, go to the polling stations at all costs and make your own decision of the civic victory. Mr. Rustamian, please. Dear compatriots, these elections are not elections about refusing that which has been refused once. This is about the future. We already have, Serge Sargsyan has been replaced by Nikol Pashinyan. That person has been turned down, but not the personal power yet. We have, through these elections, to embark on the path not to reiterate the mistakes of the past. We have to resolve the main problems of this generation. This generation has one important mission: to preserve what we had. We've had 30,000 square kilometers. Now we have Artsakh and Armenia together 42,000 square kilometers. And our objective is to keep those territories Armenian and hand them over to the next generation. Failing that, this struggle is not worth a penny. No accomplishment is worth a penny pertaining to our personal or sectoral interests. Thank you, Mr. Rustamian. Mr. Saakyan, your closing statement. Dear revolutionary free citizens, on April 22, when the all famous leaders of the revolution were arrested and there was an indefinite situation in the city, you took over the mission of leading the revolution, dear citizens. You took this to victory. Why did you lead this movement? Was it not because you were sick and tired of the criminals that have perished in politics and in the National Assembly? Wasn't it because you did no longer want to see them in politics? Today these people are aspiring to take seats, 30% of the seats in the parliament. So I call upon you to carry on with the march of the revolution to the end. And number 2 is the ballot of the citizens' decision. Dear compatriots, this debate comes to attest once again why the Republicans should be in the National Assembly. As you notice, we are the only force that are not encumbered by, we're not afraid to criticize Mr. Pashinyan and his policy. Through this work, we already have cut short several initiatives that Mr. Pashinyan also referred to, especially the taxing initiative of the remittances from the labor migrants. There is also another hazard, the expected layoffs of 150,000 budgetary workers. Mr. Pashinyan refers to the fact that he's going to carry on with our numerous programs, reforms in the army, in the foreign policy, in the pension fund, but political force that is lacking experience and has no experienced team needs to have a counterweight to establish an equilibrium. May God save us, our army, our country. We all go to the polling stations and vote for number 1 in the ballot. We hereby conclude, I don't know whether you noticed or not, we spent 3.5 hours on the air. Thank you everyone for being with us. To all viewers, the big team of Channel 1 has done great work to make this project a reality, which was the first ever, unprecedented, although some participants deemed it to be ineffective. But we believe that quite a lot of work was invested in affording 11 political parties to be on the air concurrently on Channel 1. We want to thank Mr. Jeffrey Fox, a specialist in international debates, who supported us through this, and we also want to thank all participants, and what matters most, our patient viewers and voters as well. I hope this debate afforded them a possibility to get their bearings, orient themselves, and make the choice they deem best. I propose all of us to shake hands together, wishing each other success. Of course, unless you mind.